Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to, what episode is this? I don't even know. Welcome to the Former Action Guys podcast. So we are on 62, to be exact. Episode 62, the Former Action Guys podcast. I have on today Ashley Smentek. He works for, or he doesn't work for, he owns Gold Hill Canine. He's been on before. You can go back and see or listen to him talk on episode 41. We get into his career in depth, almost all of his career. He was a sheriff in Northern California. Did all kinds of stuff, did everything from like being working on the streets as a patrol officer to working with helicopter teams doing either criminal stuff or search and rescue stuff. That's all in episode 41. He talks about that. And this one, we kind of, the last episode we recorded was right when the lockdown first started. So none of this other craziness had occurred. So we get into all that stuff. We talk about the George Floyd killing. We talk about the shooting in Georgia. We talk about the old man getting pushed over in New York. We talk about defunding the police and different kind of avenues that people are looking at for policing in the future. And for me, it's a good perspective to hear from an actual police officer to give them an opportunity to sit down for a couple hours here and go through situations. And we go back and forth on some stuff. I push back on some stuff, and there's, I just like having that perspective of the other side. That they can tell me kind of maybe what the officer was thinking, or this in this situation, this is why this happened. And for me to also play on the advocate for, the side that wants to defund the police and ask the questions like, how can we justify an old dude getting pushed over and his head bleeding, and then just walking by him and stuff like that. And then, police officers, after that happening, like the 50 police officers that resigned from the SWAT team, and why that actually happened, and not, how the media covered it compared to why it actually happened. So it's a really interesting conversation. And we talk a little bit, for those that follow me on Instagram and stuff, my 13-year-old Dotson Marley passed away a couple days ago. So we talk a little bit about that and what happened and everything, because I was actually getting ready to sit down and record with Ashley a couple days ago when I saw my dog having breathing problems, and I took him in and he passed away. So, we talk a little bit about that just because, he's a canine handler, he's a dog trainer, so it naturally came up and stuff. But all that is in here for you to enjoy and to see me, everything. I don't know. It's just it's tough to talk about. I'll just say that. Anyway, make sure to check out my website, jkramergraphics.com. If you're not subscribed on YouTube, please subscribe on YouTube. Let people know, leave comments, pass the word, have people come on the show or to come check out the show. Make sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. I'd like to get up to 100 reviews. I'm at like 72, 71 straight 5-star reviews all the way across the board, which is awesome. I appreciate that, but I want to get it up to 100. So help me out. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. Written review is better, but you can just leave a 5-star review if you want, and then tell other people about the podcast and tell them to leave a review too if they enjoy it. Because how else can we get the word out about the show and about some of the stories, these amazing stories people are telling, if we don't spread the word, I guess. I don't know. And leaving reviews helps, people see it and see it's a legitimate podcast and that it's actually entertaining. And I think all 71 people on Apple Podcasts that have given me a 5-star review so far, you are helping drive the conversation and drive people to this podcast and help me bump into the top 100 for documentary podcasts on Apple Podcasts. So I appreciate that. As always, make sure to check out my Instagram, J Kramer Graphics, and my Instagram at Former Action Guys, and enjoy the show. I think we're ready. All right, dude. Well, welcome back to the show. Appreciate you coming on. And for those that haven't seen your previous podcast, you're on episode 41, where you kind of detail a significant portion of your career. I know we didn't get to the latter half of it, or the latter like third probably. Yeah. But we did go over quite a bit of stuff, and then we got an opportunity to talk about your dog training company, your canine, Gold Hill Canine. So yeah, I just want to have you back on. So many things have changed. It's a crazy world we live in. Like last time when I was prepping for this podcast the other day, I was listening to our old one, and I was like, oh, okay, the quarantine had just started. So it was like, so now we're living in this like quasi quarantine. Everybody's doing something different. Like counties are different. Cause I'm in San Diego, and our rules are different than LA. Yeah. At the same time, there's this, social movement happening with the Black Lives Matter and all that stuff and everything going on. And it's
couple questions about law enforcement stuff before all this popped off too.
Yeah, we had started talking about that because I mean, I think anytime you talk law enforcement, there's always going to be like, where is the line for overstepping, your authority as a law enforcement officer, or overstepping your, whatever, as a human, your compassion as a human being,
Sure.
and for some stuff. And I want to point out, because I know we're going to talk about it, but I just want to point out that I'm a firm believer that there is a distinct super minority of bad police officers and incidents that happen out of the 350 million interactions a year. From the statistics that you see, it's like less than 1% are reported for, overuse of force or whatever. And I think that bad cops should be investigated and should be kicked out. And, it's interesting. We talked about that. We talked about, a police officer who had like spousal abuse or something like that, where you guys like cut his uniform off and like, cuffed him and took him away.
Yeah, that was down in Arizona. The video had just hit when on our last podcast that we did. It was just a couple days prior to that. He was arrested for like heinous spousal abuse. And yeah, they cut his uniform off there in handcuffs in the briefing room where they took him into custody because he was on duty. And yeah. I
think there's this, it's out there. You hear the people that are like the thin blue line, like the cops are protecting each other and they're not reporting each other and stuff like that. And to say that that's not happening is probably a lie, because at some point it's happening, like at some level that's going to happen. It's just the nature of the beast when you have, I don't even know how many police officers there are in the U.S., probably over 100,000. I'd imagine hundreds of thousands maybe.
LAPD has about 10,000 themselves.
Yeah, so, it's going to happen, and
45,000, I think, is their numbers. So
yeah, I don't know. I guess we're as a society we're going to figure it out, but I completely disagree with the defund the police movements, where you're trying to say that at the same time, on one hand, you're saying that police officers are undertrained and that they're not paid enough, so we're getting below average people that are coming in or whatever that are coming in to be police officers and stuff like that. And then on the other hand, you're saying we want to take money away from, we want to cut these budgets in half and redirect the funding. Sometimes not redirect it, just get rid of the police. Some of it's redirected to a more community style policing where you have interventionist almost more than a police officer with a badge and a gun. And I just can't, I know when all this is LA, so an LA announced they're cutting like $100 million or something from their police force, right?
Yeah. 150, I think, minimum.
But before all this had even happened, they had furloughed many of their civilian police or people that worked for the police force as civilians because they couldn't afford to pay them.
Right.
And now they're going to furlough, or now they're going to cut a significant amount from their budget. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I can understand like, hey, we need to have particular people that go out and handle particular instances and stuff. And I think you see that, and it's can work sometimes, like with homeless outreach teams, you see those here in Southern California.
Had a mental health response team where they were looking at trying to have some mental health professionals, if able, to respond to somebody that's in a mental health crisis, alongside law enforcement to help out. They have some better avenues, and they're the ones that are going to be taking over the care anyways after a person is put on a mental health hold or something like that. But yeah, man.
It's a weird time, man. It's a weird world. So like I was saying, yeah, we talked about some of this. We kind of touched over some of the subjects that are now like in the the front of everybody's minds, because it's policing is just a thing that needs to be talked about constantly. I think just because it's you're taking rights away from your fellow human beings. Do we want to make sure it's justified? And yeah, exactly, we should.
It's almost like you foreshadowed this. I was kind of replaying our conversation in different parts of that, and was like, that was eerie, the fact that we touched on some of these things that then a precipitous event exploded this. And I think it's super important to separate everything and have independent discussions, because of what I think the discussion I'm seeing now is let's just go full Monty on this. defund police, get rid of it. So I think it's really important to segment this conversation and go, first off, that all is an agenda in and of itself. This wasn't where a horrible incident was captured on film and suddenly everybody came up with these ideas within a matter of weeks. These ideas and ideologies have been years in the making and have been simmering quietly by the people that truly believe in them. That is their ultimate end goal agenda, is to have a police-free state. And what that looks like for anybody, they can't give you any articulable answers. When you say, well, how does this look? Well, I don't know. It's just what I want. I want no police to be around. Well, shit. Like, I want that world too. I want the world to be so kind, so generous, and us also be respectful of our fellow man, that there would be no need for policing. In the history of humankind, that has not been achieved. And I think we have a little bit of ways to go for that. So then if you're just talking about, okay, let's have a different model, where a more progressive model where officers are trained at a better standard to handle the things that have now been put on their plate. I'm all for that. That absolutely should happen. How do you do that and cut budgets is beyond me.
Yeah, 100%.
Kind of touched upon it in the last podcast. This is a nationwide discussion, and it's much deeper than that. Having a discussion about policing in California and having a discussion about policing in some small county, and like I'll throw Georgia out there or something like that. I mean, I think even I said last time, I have a friend in Idaho that has been a police officer for a while before having to go to the academy. Those days were over 20 years ago in California. So what California standards are and what other states and other jurisdiction standards are not the same. So I then think you have to then drill down even farther into this conversation and say, okay, so are we talking about bad police officers from a ethical standpoint, as in these people are evil, like Denzel Washington in Training Day? Like, are you talking that style of person versus somebody that is undertrained and did something not out of malice, but out of poor training, no alternatives? And then you look at that and go, okay, if those people are already undertrained, and then you're going to start taking away different avenues available to them, like the carotid hold that everybody labels it a chokehold. It is not a chokehold. It is not meant to restrict the airflow to a person. It's a carotid hold, the same that is done in MMA, and it's a very effective tactic when done properly and under the circumstances that warrant it. You don't just go up to behind a grandma on the street that's like won't sign a ticket and put her in a carotid. Like, when it comes time to apply that, shit is really fucking bad at that point. And it is the effective technique for subduing somebody with little to no harm. And I'm not talking about underlying medical conditions that could be exacerbated by anything. Just an average, healthy, want to fight person, putting a proper carotid on them, they're done. They're out. You can handcuff them and they come back. No harm, no foul. There's not even taser darts in that person that you got to pull out. There's no pepper spray that you got to decon for the next 45 minutes to an hour. I mean, it truly is something that in specific circumstances is a highly effective tool. And then if you take that tool away, now what? You now have a broad gap in the use of force continuum that now you have to escalate to a higher level of force because you took that out because you didn't like one aspect of it. And then
can you explain the use of force continuum a little bit? Kind of like what would different levels of use of force and how and when those are applied?
So use of force is a continuum. They used to talk about it in a lot of different terms. It used to be a wheel. It used to be a ladder. They moved away kind of from the ladder concept because it kind of gave people the notion that you had to start at one level of force and walk your way up a ladder to get a higher level of force, when in reality, you may need to start at this level of force and then you can de-escalate and go down or up or sideways. So I think that wheel was the better description. And then, they're always coming up with some new thing. But in essence, what it is using the appropriate amount of force in that moment to effect an arrest. And that can be from simply verbal control. Turn around, put your hands behind your back. And somebody goes, cool. And they do, all the way up to deadly force. And so when you talk about things like less than lethal force, that's why we moved away from the term non-lethal force, because all force can be lethal depending on some other extenuating circumstances. So you take a beanbag and you beanbag round out of a shotgun and you shoot it at somebody, but when they first came out, they were flat and they would hook sometimes like a frisbee, and if they're spinning, they could hit somebody in the throat and actually cause them to die. That's an unintended consequence of the force. So it's no longer non-lethal because somebody died as a result of it. So they moved to less lethal. Under most circumstances, this level of force should not produce lethal results. Canine bites, batons, and then all the way, then working back down to lower levels through pepper spray, tasers, and things like that. So it's using the appropriate level of force. And then typically the teaching should be, and then now that this has become politicized, it's going to become more dangerous. You should use the highest level of force necessary and no more than that. However, that doesn't mean that you sit there and roll around with somebody on the ground when one well-placed baton strike that could break their arm ends the fight and you're done. So in my career, I saw the hesitancy creep in, probably unlike any point in history of policing, where people are now worried about the outcomes of the force they're going to use while they're using it. Like, what are the political and legal ramifications? You should always consider the legal ramifications of am I justified in using this force? And when I go to write the report, this is why I document, this is why I use this force, because of a whole host of factors. It's not just, well, he was standing there and said, fuck you. It was like, he had a fighting stance. He based on his mannerisms, I believed he had a higher level of fight training than an average citizen. Like, there's a difference between a drunk guy pulling away from you and a dude squaring off with you that's like, I'll sock you in the jaw kind of thing, Yeah. So all of those factors come into play when you make a legal decision to use force. But the hesitancy of using force, when you can watch like countless videos right now on the internet of people, of officers struggling with a suspect to control them and subduing, when if they'd just used a higher level of force, maybe it's just a control hold, maybe an actual really good control hold that the guy's like, fuck, and you're like, yeah, stop fucking around, like, let me put these handcuffs on you, get you in the car, de-escalate this whole thing. So by using a higher level of force instead of like trying to grab them and they're pulling and they're here, and then you have to end up using more force because you didn't just do it right the first time. That's the big deal with force. Is
how much follow-on training did you get after the academy on use of force and like, hey man, this is how, like, fight training or whatever you want to call it, like using that actual like chokehold or using a baton on somebody? How much training is it, or how much is it kind of, hey, we told you about it and you're gonna have to kind of figure it out on the street?
In California, it's ongoing. It's mandated. There's post officers standards and training. It's the state mandate. You're not required to follow them, but in California, should you choose not to follow post guidelines as an agency, you would be taking all the liability on yourself. I personally can't think of an agency that I've ever heard of that does not follow post guidelines. So they mandate the level of training. You have in-service training every year, or my agency did it for like 3 months of the year. The first quarter, you went every other week for training. So there's a certain amount of hours for everything. Domestic violence training, legal updates, critical incident response, dealing with mental health issues, and then firearms, defensive tactics, weaponless defense. And then as time has evolved, I've seen that training change. There was a couple prescribed methods in the academy that were the big ones, of joint manipulations and baton stuff. And then that has evolved into the more progressive agencies doing some ground fighting stuff. So an agency that uses or has the carotid hold as a part of their escalation of force, it has to be in their policy to use it. You can't just go and do it just because you feel like it. So if your agency doesn't authorize you to use the carotid, then if you did it, you would basically be in a fight for your life, and all force is legal if it's like if deadly force is justified and you're choking somebody literally to death, then deadly force is justified. But if your agency doesn't approve the carotid, then that is an unapproved thing that you would be doing, and you can't use it. So if your agency uses the carotid, there is a state mandated amount of training that you have to go through. You have to read the policy. You have to describe it. There's a testing thing every phase. It did it every single year. And so, yeah, every agency in California has ongoing training, and there's a required amount of that for whatever it is that you're training. There's a required amount of hours and stuff.
That makes sense. I mean, and it's good to hear, really, because, you know, I don't know, you really don't hear about, it's never talked about, like, follow-on training that police officers and stuff go through. How much of the training is, like, legitimate, and how much is it like, fuck, man, we got to go do this fucking check in the box. Like, I'm not actually getting anything from this. Because that's, in the military, let's be honest, we would do annual training, and a lot of it became computer-based, and it was just like, click through the slides, and then do the little test at the end, you know?
It really depends what you're doing. And again, this is going to be agency specific. More progressive agencies do a better job at this. And I will put California up there. I would say kind of the worst agency in California is probably still marginally better, like drastically better than another agency elsewhere in the country that have these state things that doesn't have the funding, and you might not receive a lot of in-service training after the academy on a lot of topics. They just don't simply have the budget and time to do it. So we're fortunate and spoiled in California to have that. Most of it is legit in some form. Some of it is like bleed out your ears monotonous, but it's all important in some points, you know. It's just some of it is like, oh my God, why are we sitting through this when, you know, we could be doing more defensive tactics stuff, doing more of that. But, you know, really it's all important. So you have to look at it as, yeah, it's just what we got to go through. But we didn't have too much of the online type stuff. It was always instructors up there that were subject matter experts that got the updates, or they would call people in from mental health services that are experts in that critical incident stuff. And it was good training. And then our cadre of trainers that were defensive tactics and range staff, they were at my two agencies I worked at, were all highly motivated. And I think that's one of the best shifts in law enforcement over the last 20 years is having a level of training that is progressive and keeping with the times and the tactics of suspects as they evolve. Because the big unknown and what people are always forgetting in this is criminals train just as hard as we do. They're in prison, they're training. You can watch videos. They learn how to defeat the things that we're doing. And frankly, 20 years ago when I went through the academy, 25 almost, that was the big worry, is like hardened criminals knowing how to get your gun. They practice taking guns out of holsters. You can watch videos of them on prison yards actually simulating having guns, disarming officers, and that was always the worry.
Really? That's crazy.
Yeah, watch prison.
I mean, it makes sense, I guess, but that's, you know.
Yeah, they'll roll with each other in a corner of the yard where you can't really see them and stuff, but they're still kind of on video. They'll practice getting out of the very handcuffing techniques that we're teaching. And so that was the worry then. Frankly, the worry for me now, if I was just getting into law enforcement, is simply the mob coming at you. Just before we got on this call here, this Skype, I watched a video from NYPD, which is, I mean, rapidly dissolving, like rapidly coming off the chains. They have this guy in handcuffs. They're trying to put him in the car, and the mob is coming at them because they know you are not going to do anything to them now. Like, they're all committing crimes. They get at the very least, they're committing the crime of interfering with an officer in the performance of their duties. And if you wanted to push that, you could arrest them simply because if I now have to take my energy and focus from what I'm here investigating and the arrest and focus on you, that is now changing my job performance. And you could make the argument that is a criminal offense. And then one of the suspects actually ends up attacking, or one of the crowd ends up confronting and shoving one of the officers, and then he gets in a fight.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. It just, like, literally I just saw it on Instagram. And the irony of what happened in there is, if you're watching NYPD's new use of force policies, they are not allowed to kneel on a suspect, do on their back, their neck, anything like that. They are not allowed to use any type of carotid hold, choke hold. They actually have I watched the video, one of their use of force instructors showing the prohibited techniques. One of them being, if you're familiar with MMA, if you as the officer are holding the suspect down under like your armpit, and you have them in the chokehold. Their head is tucked under your armpit. They're bent over. That is a prohibited technique. This suspect that attacked one of the officers that's trying to put this guy in the car had the officer in that prohibited technique. Like it's brutal to watch, because this cop's trying to fight for his life and scoop this guy's legs, and he can't. And the guy has him in the very thing I watched a couple days ago that's NYPD is prohibited from. So this officer has
That's
now
ridiculous, man.
really, really, really handcuffed, if you will, to getting hurt. And he loses the fight, and the guy runs off in the crowd. And that is now the biggest danger. It's not the suspect doing this. It's the crowd. I'm watching videos over and over and over again from a lot of different jurisdictions. They're on traffic stops. They're trying to write tickets, and mobs are coming at them and interrupting that process. And that they're learning very quickly that you can't do anything back. They're not going to use force against you. And you can disrupt that to the point of, in law enforcement, it's called a lynching, when you take that word has been like really, really horrified over the years. But when you take somebody in custody and help them escape, that's what lynching is. So,
really? Huh.
And California law. So, yeah.
I didn't know that. Dude, it's a weird world right now for police officers. I have a buddy that's been on the street for less than a year. Oof. And he's like, dude, I'm thinking about changing careers, man. He's like, it's crazy. He's like, there's, with the talk of not only defunding, which takes away training and the ability for the, police officers to be better at their jobs and stuff like that, but to, take techniques away, like you said, where even if you protect yourself, then you're going to get in trouble, it's like, and then talking about removing qualified immunity and stuff like that, which I can see both sides of the argument. At some point, at some level, police officers should be protected and be able to do their job without the fear of like, man, am I going to get sued? And like, however, there are obviously other circumstances where some dudes take it too far and they should be able to get, arrested or whatever, which, we're seeing now more of, which isn't I don't know. It's just,
with qualified immunity is there can be a judge's ruling where you lose your qualified immunity. Happens all the time. If you are deemed so far out of the bounds of your profession, of your professional competency, I guess you could say, that you will lose your qualified immunity. They'll say another reasonable police officer would have not. They'll have a hearing on it, and you lose qualified immunity.
So are you meaning for that circumstance or for in like the future?
Yeah, no, for that circumstance.
Okay.
Which is a fair system. You have qualified immunity if you're acting within the bounds of your job, meaning you can the department will get sued, but if you're acting legally and within policy and everything else, that burden is now on the department. If you act so far out of bounds that the department's like, that is not what we teach, that is, you did this on your own, and you acted so far left of what another reasonable, competent officer would do, that hearing for qualified immunity, you lose your qualified immunity because you fucked up that bad. That's
how often does that happen though? And I think that's where the people that say the thin blue line guys that won't turn on each other, that's kind of where they say it gets lost at. Like it's other police officers saying, "No, man, you're good." Which I'm not saying that is the case, or I agree with that. I'm just
conversations need to be had to if we're public servants, that stuff needs to be understood, because we do serve the public at the end of the day. We're not here serving each other. And so that I can't give you a statistic of how often that happens. My gut reaction to it is as often as it needs to. And that power to do that is taken out of, it's not officers covering for each other. It's an attorney says, you did this to my client, and files a lawsuit. And during that legal process, the judicial system decides whether you acted within the bounds of your profession or outside of it. Yeah. That is as equitable a system as you could possibly hope to have, where it's not all of us covering for each other at that point. It's the facts out that you did this to my client, and this is outside of your department policy. This is outside of law. This is outside of all the different things. And then a judge looks at that and goes, I agree or disagree.
Yeah.
And Like the system that is coming now where you lose qualified immunity, I don't think people understand what the ramifications are of that. I have a colleague that is a canine handler in the Denver metropolitan area for a very large agency there. He's retiring as we speak, and through my connections with them, supplying dogs for them, he told me about them. They're Colorado just did it. They're going to lose qualified immunity in certain circumstances in a much fashion. And what that'll mean is every canine handler will decide, do I want to handle a dog? Because I'm now, as a canine handler, I'm subject to much more civil liability. I have a higher force present with me, and the lawsuits that come from dog bites are a higher degree of them coming in. Why on earth would somebody want to handle a dog at that point? I mean, they're cool and they're fluffy and they're fun to do, but like if your own personal everything is subject to that, where's that? So maybe have something more like doctors. Doctors kill far more people every year than any police officer, and they have malpractice insurance. In the course of doing their jobs, it's an expected risk that you will probably fuck some things up. And when that happens, your insurance steps in and takes care of your unintentional act. And so, but that's a different profession and it's a different circumstance. And they look at it and go, well, you're trying to do the best you can. So maybe that same litmus could be applied to police officers, which I think it actually is. That's what the system is doing. They look at that and say, absent all the political fanfare that is going on, did you act within all of the known things? There's Supreme Court decisions that determine use of force and how that is applied and in what circumstances. And so it's not like they're just going out and making up rules on the spot. Then you see like what happened at Atlanta shortly after the George Floyd's incident, and you go, okay, well, I'm not there. I'm not going to criticize one way or another. But would I have acted in the same fashion given the facts that I know, what I can see from some videos and stuff? And it's like, it's highly likely that I would have probably reacted very similarly given that set of circumstances. And to be immediately charged in the fashion they were, fired, which means they lose all of their protections as police officers, and then charged.
You're talking about the two guys at the Wendy's, right? The one where they had the DUI suspect who then tried to run. Sure. So on that, I hate that automatically. I don't know. It's the media and everything is so distorted now, and depending on where you get your information from, you could get completely different stories. And that was one of the ones where, they were like, well, he shot him in the back. And it's like, well, if you watch the video of it, the dude is turning and shooting. And the thing, too, is a lot of people were like, well, he shouldn't have shot him. Like, this shouldn't have happened. And in my mind, I'm like, if you watch the actual video and watch that situation, as bad as it is, I mean, at the end, because the entire time everyone was professional. He was good with them. They were good with it. Everything was all good. I disagreed with the fact of the first guy allowing him to move his own car. Like, hey, you're drunk. You shouldn't be in the parking or like in this line. Pull your car into the spot. Like, okay, if you think he's drunk, you probably shouldn't have just told him to drive, even 5 feet.
As an experienced person, I wouldn't have done that either. But you're also at that point, it actually goes towards the bigger thing of he could just be sleeping in his car. Like we've all been super tired and maybe dozed off in a line. So they didn't even that thing where I looked at that and like, why would you let that guy drive his car? I mean, because in the back of your mind, this dude is probably drunk. But I'm like, they even gave him so much credibility that you can move your car because we're just investigating somebody sleeping in their car. There were no facts like we saw him drinking. That's
a good argument for it. I can see that. I can see that argument going through.
So maybe he just got off shift. He worked like multiple days in a row. And as he's sitting waiting for the line to move, he fell asleep. So they're like, hey, dude, we need to figure out what's going on. Just move your car over here for me. And then it unfolded, And
everything unfolded. And for me, the thing is when they went to arrest him and then he started fighting, obviously, and they all that happened. I think they both ended up pulling their tasers out at some point. He got one of them.
Yeah.
And then as he tried to run and then turn and fire the taser, I've heard that it was already fired. I don't know if that's the case or not.
That taser has multiple cartridges.
Okay.
They have The original versions came out, had one cartridge in the front, one shot. You had to replace the cartridge. The new ones now have multiple slots. I think there's a model that even has like 6 in it. I know
Okay.
4, and I think there's regularly ones with 2 on them too. So.
But so my big thing though is if people actually watch the video, and I don't think it was ever, it was never really explained well in the media. If you watch the actual video, the officer reacts and fires in under a second from the time that he turned to shoot the taser at him. He pulled his gun and fired in under a second, and that is, to me, is in this 20-minute time frame, this dude got. Okay, man, hey, you're drunk. Hey, they look up his history. He's on parole only because of COVID-19, I think, but he's on parole. And this is a dude that had a violent history. Like this, he wasn't like a pothead that just got pulled over, I smoke weed, so I could say that. He wasn't just a dude that, and I've been arrested for weed too. Sure. He wasn't just a dude that got pulled over and got fucked up because he had a joint and he was in jail. Right. This is a dude that has a known violent history. So, and then he fights the officers, and then he tries to apply force like a taser. And then people just assume that, well, he was just going to tase him or it wasn't going to work. And it's like, dude, he could have disabled him and then pulled his gun at that point.
Right.
And then, so for me, the things that are left out of the story that kind of blows my mind as someone that's a journalism student is like, one, the officer fired in under a second. Right. 2, the dude had a pretty violent history, and it was a known violent history. Now he's continuing that history by committing more violence, and fighting and stuff like that. And then 3 is that the Atlanta Police Department the week prior had arrested or fired 2 officers because they used a taser because they said it was deadly force. And then on this one, a week later, they're saying that was not deadly force and he shouldn't have responded with a firearm. And I'm like, see, and that's the bullshit, man. And that's the bureaucracy bullshit where now you're getting into people that are the morality police rather than the actual police, or we're not following the law. We're following what's going to happen in social media, and then we'll let the court sort it out. If he finds not guilty, that's later on. It's like, dude,
and that's a very dangerous game to play to keep moving hard, especially
for sure.
Critical within the week. If you keep moving the bar on law enforcement or all of us for anything, and you can look at it in the cancel culture mentality now of. This was okay to say a week ago, and now it's not. And now we can come after you for anything. You can deem anything unsavory or unpolitical or racial. Now things are racial just because you say it. Like if you call you a racist, you are now one. And if I get enough people to say you're racist, then that becomes fact to people.
It's crazy, man. The mob mentality is crazy.
Yeah. And so let's dissect that incident. Like, he was actually with those guys for about 47 minutes. And I 100% can guarantee you, extremely early on in that contact, they knew exactly who he was. Mm-hmm. Whether it was before they got there or not, I couldn't tell you. If they had a license plate provided to them, they would have ran the license plate. They would have come back with the registered owner's information so that they would at least know who owns the car. And if he is the registered owner, they would have could have said, we know if this is the guy in this car that is registered to him, then it's this guy and it's his history. And in spite of, and so even if they pull up on scene, and as we just discussed, they treated him as though he actually was sleeping. They didn't prejudice anything else in that context about walking up to a guy and saying, we think you're drunk, until they figured out that he was, right? They allowed him to act like a sleeping person. And so at whatever point in that contact, they figured out who he actually was whenever he provided them with the license. And it was very, very early on, I'm certain. Look at the way that they treated him in spite of that history. We all can go like, well, he was this, he was that, but they actually acted as though he was any other person, like with a high degree of professionalism. I was like really impressed with, it was exactly as it should be in spite of whatever history they knew. And then he had the choice of to go to jail and face his DUI charges or not. And there's a difference. I've been in a lot of fights in my career that people were trying to get away. And there's a huge difference in, I don't want to go to jail, and as soon as you try to put the handcuffs on me, I juke you and I'm gone, right? And you're running after them and you grab them and they slip you again and they're gone again. Like, their whole goal is to get away. Yeah. That's not what that fight was. And to say that in the charging documents and the charging statement by the DA, he was civil and respectful and non-violent for whatever it was, 47 minutes they keep throwing out there. Of course, which is why everything was great. And they were the most professional contact you could ask for until they were in a fight. He was fighting them. And then sure, but that was different. Like, he was raining blows on them and grabbing tasers. That's not like, I just want to get away.
He was a big dude, and both of those officers weren't. Neither one of them were very tall dudes, and I think he had a couple inches on both of them in size and height and stuff.
And he knows how to fight. You can see, like, that's not somebody that's never been in a fight before. And then when he runs away, he had so I run away, and they're like, whoa, crap, somehow I grabbed their taser in the melee, because things happen. Ditch it, throw it. Like, you don't have, he turned around to fire that. Yeah. And in the second moment that officer has to decide, he's deciding, do I know that's the taser that he's firing at me? Which in and of itself would justify a deadly force response, because I know what the effects of the taser are. I know what it can do to me, and I'm holding a gun in my hand now, and he can then disarm me because I'm incapacitated. Or did he turn and he's pointing something that looks like a gun in a dark environment because he ran away? I don't know whether they searched him early on or not, but there have been guns found even after people are searched. So he produces something. And whether the officer's like, yeah, I knew it was my taser, and I still shot him because of X, Y, and Z. And shooting somebody in the back and them getting hit in the back are completely two different things. Yeah. So, like, shooting somebody in the back as they are running away, and that is your target, under certain circumstances, is actually still justified if there's an articulable threat to public safety. Somebody's running with a gun and has already demonstrated that they shot other people, and they're running into a public area, and you're like, that's a big danger to public safety. Would be legal and justified to shoot them in the back under those circumstances. But most of these incidences where somebody is hit in the back, that's not the intended target. They're falling and tripping and stumbling, and as they turn, the rounds are impacting their back. So again,
now, to play the other side too, because I don't want to be like one-sided about it. Now, one of the concerns that people are having is that they think, well. So first off, the people that said, well, they should have just got him an Uber, they should have just done this, you're an idiot. Like, that's so stupid. So I'll just put that out there. Two, the people that are saying that this is unjustified or that he shouldn't have even shot at all, part of the evidence is, I think 2 rounds struck one of the vehicles that was waiting in line for food at the Wendy's. So a civilian vehicle that was not involved at all. Yeah. So as an agency, if you have a shooting incident like that, where that, you're obviously directed at the subject, and you want to take the shots there, but you do have some stray rounds that hit something like that. What's the process there? I know there's going to be an investigation and all that. Like, how is that all kind of hashed out?
So there's 2 different investigations that go on during a shooting, and I'm speaking from experience. I've been in one. So there's the internal investigation by the agency to determine whether you acted within policy, and that's going to be run concurrent with the investigation that is typically done by the outside agency, the district attorney's office. They're going to be determining whether it was legally justified, as in, was it justifiable homicide, or is this homicide and you acted outside the scope of the law? Those 2 run concurrently, and typically an agency won't conclude their findings until the criminal side is done as well. So there's a policy matter, and did this person act outside of the policy? I'll give you an example. A supervisor at my agency was in an off-duty shooting that was extremely questionable, and he was not charged criminally because there weren't enough facts to justify that he broke the law in the shooting, but he was demoted as a result of it because he was really outside of policy on several different things. So there's law violations and policy violations. So if you violate your policy, then they have to look and say, are our policies outdated or wrong or flawed? Or did you violate them and you will be punished within that system internally, up to and including termination for policy violations? That is not the same as you violated law. So hitting a car, you also have to take in real life scenarios. We can all say what our shooting and training is on a range. That is not shooting while in a foot pursuit. And
after wrestling with a dude for 45 seconds, like...
in a fight, and I can tell you, one of my agencies, we did some amazing training right before I left there. My first agency, we actually were in full uniform. The only thing they had us take off was the badge, so we didn't smash it into somebody, But we were in full, real patrol uniform, and we fought with one of the instructors. They gave us a simunition gun, so it's the same as your gun, but it fires.
Yeah.
We started off. The instructor was on his back underneath you, and you're on your back, and he starts off with you in a chokehold, and you have to fight him off. It happened to be one of my best friends, so I didn't feel bad when I elbowed him right in the eye and gave him a black eye.
Fuck him.
Wanted you to fight one of the defensive tactics instructors, within reason, and then you once you fought them off, they said the suspect took off, and then you go like farther down the parking garage, and you see a guy in a simunition suit, and he's actually, you could use baton strikes on him, you could use whatever needed, and he had a knife in his hand. It's supposedly simulating the suspect that's now turning to confront you, and he's just simply walking towards you saying, kill me, and he's got a knife. And unbeknownst to you, they've induced a malfunction into your sim gun. So when you go, just because he's quite close when this is happening, and you can start off giving him commands, but he is moving rapidly towards you. And depending on when your brain clears, how close you are to him, you're within a very close distance, which is lethal for a knife because they can cover that distance
pretty quickly. Yeah.
Gun has an already induced malfunction. They did it on purpose. So whether you have the wherewithal, and I can tell you that stress, there's a lot of people I watch that I know are very well put together people, and they just simply tried to keep pulling the trigger on a gun that was malfunctioning, and the guy walked up and stabbed him because their brain is so locked down under stress that that's all they can do, and it's a repetition ingrained memory, and forcing yourself to breathe through that and think through some rapidly evolving events is very, very tough. So then you take a real life situation that mimics exactly what I just described, and this guy, you now are transitioning from a foot pursuit instantly to, is deadly force justified? Yes, it is. I'm going to use it, and hopefully I'm looking at the background, but in a darkened environment. As I'm also, you see him, I think, just speaking off of very foggy memory, he's moving next. The officer is also moving laterally towards the car. So as the suspect starts and you start shooting, by the time you're done shooting, you may be facing a different direction, which is probably impacted it. So yes, we're responsible for all the rounds. Yes, you have to take that into consideration. And yes, if you were to injure somebody in the course of doing that, it's severely frowned upon and could be criminal if they determine that you were negligent in how you do that. Or is this the byproduct of getting in a shooting in a crowded parking lot and it sucks no matter what you do kind of thing,
I think so. Like you mentioned earlier that you had a supervisor that was demoted because of policy. They didn't use the policy when they engaged in an off-duty incident, right? That's what you said. And I think the issue that a lot of people have with like police officers shooting and stuff is that I can see the argument for if you are reprimanded for not using policy in an incident where a gun was employed, like you actually were firing, but you did it outside of the policy, right, then how can they justify keeping you? If they say, hey, you didn't do, it was egregious enough or we're going to demote you, which is a big deal, especially at that level, then how can you also justify saying that we should keep this person on when now you know that you maybe not be able to trust them with a firearm? So I can see that argument from that side as well. I can also see an argument from the police side where sometimes policies have to be looked at again. Like, hey, in this situation, like this is the reason, like if you can explain the reasoning, like this is the reasoning why that it was happening. And that makes sense. Yeah. That's different than being negligent. But you know what I'm saying? Like if you're firing a firearm and you're in trouble for firing a firearm improperly, how can you justify keeping somebody on the force like that?
So I couldn't. The guy's an idiot. I know him personally.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Like straight up. But I'm also not privy to all the facts in the case.
Yeah.
I only what we're able to know, which isn't a lot. But this is human nature. When you then take it out of, is it a legal thing to, is it now a departmental thing? Then sure, things come into play, like his standing within the department. Has he ever been in trouble before? Has he ever been disciplined? What policy did he actually violate? I don't know exactly. I've never heard it explained to me that, well, he violated X, Y, and Z. It might have just they don't feel he should have gotten involved off duty, but did we actually have a policy for that? So there's the level of, did he step outside of policy enough to fire him, which plenty of times happens, or is it enough to discipline him, and demoting him is a severe discipline?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's a lot of factors involved in it, and I can't say I was happy with most of them, but I'm not the guy sitting there with all those facts available to me. And then that person, being the sheriff, where the buck stops, is the person that is deciding this person's fate and life, of whether they are in law enforcement. And ultimately that responsibility lies with them. If that feels good about, I mean, because be honest, if you have a fucking moron like that out there on the streets, you're the one that is allowing him to do it. And this dude, because I actually know him quite well, the likelihood of him doing something stupid like that again is probably pretty high. And you're assuming that liability. And I couldn't agree less with it, but I don't get to make those decisions. I think
it's good though that people see that you as a fellow police officer can look and go, hey man, there's some bad stuff here. There's some stuff like that where I disagree with it. And I think the hard pill for some people to swallow is, like you said, you don't even have the full information. And I think people want more transparency from the police departments of, hey, I want to see the details of this investigation and why this guy was allowed to remain on the force, or hey, why was he fired from the force, And it's go ahead.
Or because I know you're posing that question for the broader conversation. Who gets to see that? Do we just put it out on the news for everybody that is subject matter experts on stuff to decide? Is it a civilian review board? Is it, I don't actually have the answer on what the thing is. I know there's multiple people in that chain that it goes through. It's not like if the investigation is done, it goes to the end result. There's lieutenants involved, there's captains, there's the sheriff. So there's a lot of people that have to sign off on this.
Yeah, it's not a quick like, oh yeah, well he's an idiot, so we're gonna fire him. I realize that. I think it should be something though that any citizen, if they want to submit a FOIA request and they want that information, they should be able to get it without like any kind of pushback. Like, hey, I want to see, because, and here's an instance, for example, back home, I'm from Lafayette, Indiana. There was a state trooper that killed a guy, and I didn't personally know him, but multiple of my friends knew this guy.
Okay.
And the state trooper had only been on the force, I think, for like a year or something. Pretty young kid, right?
Yeah.
And the guy was at his daughter had broken down on the side of the road, and he was there helping her work on her car. So the hood was up and he was like under the hood apparently. But he had a gun tucked into his waistband, but he had a concealed carry permit.
Okay.
The family is saying that this officer just pulled up and saw the gun and then just started shooting and killed him. And the officer obviously has his own story as well.
Sure.
And I don't know the guy, and I don't know the particular details of the situation, but I feel like if he was exonerated by the department and he's still a state trooper, and there's a lot of people that disagree with that, but there's also you can't get all the information. And I think if my son or daughter was killed and you're like, okay, well this cop didn't do anything wrong, he's okay, but in my own mind I'm like, dude, there's no way my kid would have done anything to, like, he's not gonna pull a gun on a cop or something like that. I would want to be able to access that information and actually look at what happened and where. I don't know, man. It's a thin line. It's a tough thing. It's have to
that. That's the criminal record. That's the criminal investigation. That is all public record. That's not that it's there.
I'm talking about internally for the department, like the decision to keep that dude on the force and stuff like that. Is that, you're saying that stuff can be accessed?
No, not the internal investigation, but it's concurrent with the criminal investigation. So if the criminal investigation finds that there was no crime committed and the internal investigation finds that there was no policy violations, what is there to disclose? They kept him because he didn't violate any.
Well, I would say I would want to see the facts of it, of the internal one also, just to say like, hey, you guys forgot about this. Maybe they missed something. Maybe there's something. And the only reason I bring that up is because that adds another layer of transparency, where as a police department, if you're doing everything right and everything's fine, then you can be like, here, take a look. Like, this is why, here's our policies, and this is the situation as we saw it and how it unfolded. We used evidence from, dash cameras and body cams. That dude didn't have a body cam. That was one of those situations where they're like, why the fuck this dude did not have a body cam?
Well, and body cam. So let me address those those two investigations, like I said, they run concurrently, and in my instance, and I can't speak for every agency how they do it.
Mm-hmm.
Those investigations literally happen. Those two entities are sitting in the same room. The detective
okay.
and the DA investigators are sitting in there with me and my attorney hours after my shooting, and they are asking questions for their own investigations, and they are happening at the same time. So one isn't doing something that the other isn't doing, and they share information with each other. So it's not like the DA is going to find some evidence over here and not tell the agency about it. And I would hope that the agency isn't going to find some evidence over here, because the agency isn't even looking for the same things that the DAs are. The agency is looking for the fact, did you violate any policies?
Mm-hmm.
That's what you need to know. Because if you did, then we're probably going to fire you right now, and then you're going to be on your own to work your way through this criminal investigation, because our internal investigation immediately figured out. I mean, and that's the problem. They're firing these guys without even any investigation.
Yeah, that's
with the next. I think they were fired within 24 or 48 hours. How on earth could you possibly put together a let's flip that. If it was a civilian, and that's how fast you investigated something, and they were already like being fired and charged, like that same set of circumstances is incredibly fast. Everybody would go, that's not even an impartial investigation. I mean, unless it's that egregious that you like watch the video and go, okay, that's completely out of the bounds of normal, like sanity. Like, what the hell did you just do?
Yeah, I think that was the issue in Minneapolis that people had is like, dude, how can you not watch that video and go, dude, that's fucked up? Like, at least arrest the dude who had his knee on the dude's neck. You know, maybe the other guys, you wait for an investigation to come out. But the dude that, like, I don't know. I get that. I get the upset, you know, people being upset about it. And that's kind of what drove a lot of the protests, too. It's like, why are these dudes not getting arrested? Right. But I also see your side, too. Like, hey, we're in a free society where we are like, hey, you're innocent until proven guilty. And right. We're going to have that opportunity for everything to kind of play out. I see both sides.
Because we don't deteriorate back to, like, you know, not to go like tin hat type thing, but we don't want to deteriorate back to like Salem witch trial days, where if I pointed to you and say you're a witch, and there wasn't much of a trial, and you're just you get all the punishment that witches have, right? Mm-hmm. And if we subject ourselves to the mob mentality, if you look at a video and say, I don't like that, that's against the law. Well, but that's not what laws are. So whether that officer should have gotten off of his neck or not, should he have tried something else? Should they have? I don't know. I haven't seen the video of what occurred prior to that. I do know they struggled to get him into a car, and then don't quote me on this, but I think he was trying to kick his way out of the car, which is why he came out of the car and was on the ground being knelt on. So, again, I'm very foggy on facts here, but I think their policy is once somebody is displaying signs of excited delirium, which is what would be commonplace for what he was experiencing, their policy is that you don't then transport them. They have to be transported by ambulance. So if he's combative and they're waiting for the ambulance to get there, is that acceptable then to be kneeling on him to hold him in place for his own safety, because he's trying to harm himself. He's banging himself against cars. He continues to fall down if he's standing up. He throws. I read something recently that he was so intoxicated he was falling on his own. So now are you holding him down for his own safety versus I'm pinning his neck to the ground?
I don't think. Yeah, I would say I don't think it was people are upset that they were holding him down. It was the method, and then it was also the other officers, you know, not helping, not looking at him, being like, "Dude, you're fucking choking this dude." However, I will say, which I didn't know until like a week or so after it happened, was that two of those officers were in their officer, like, what is that called? The officer training, the FTO. Yeah, they were in an FTO. Together, they had been on the street for less than a week in field training. So to say that one of them should have stopped the other dude, yeah, they should have. But I can see where they're like, dude, I'm an officer in training. Like, I have no idea. I don't know my hole from my ass, you know, my ass from a hole in the ground. You know, kind of deal. Like, is it my place to tell the senior guy that's my trainer to, like, he's doing something wrong? You know, like, it's a real fucked up situation.
But we're all determining level of wrongness based on a video that isn't the complete thing. So if there is a lot more that occurred before that which will come out in trial here, that warrants them holding him down in that fashion, and then you have two new officers going, I'm not exactly sure what should be going on right now, but that actually seems plausible based on what this guy was doing ahead of time. He's kneeling on him to hold him down. And I just read something on Facebook this morning. Take it for what it's worth because it's on Facebook. It's not verified fact. But the 20-page autopsy has come back from him from board-certified medical examiner with another board-certified examiner. So this is not somebody that's hired with, different political motivations to find different things. And I read through it this morning, and death was not, asphyxiation was not the cause of death. There's no traumatic injury to his neck. There's no traumatic injury to his trachea. It just lays it all out. I mean, those are, if that is actually the thing, and I'm not verifying that it is or not, those are medical facts. So if the thing is saying that kneeling on his neck is, he knelt on his neck till he died. His kneeling on his neck killed him. That's what they're charging him with, is that he actually murdered him.
Yeah.
Is it a contributing factor to an already spiraling death based on his blood toxicology, based on,
Yeah, they were saying that he had a lot of drugs in his blood, but
that's in the autopsy report I just read, and it's a shocking amount of fentanyl and a whole bunch of other stuff.
There's definitely extenuating circumstances and stuff like that, and obviously the defense is going to bring all that stuff to light, and it's going to be interesting to watch the case. I just don't think. I think if he gets off, I think it's going to be because they overcharged him. Because I think they ended up bumping it up to murder 1, which now you have to find that he
premeditated.
Yeah, premeditated. That's the word I was looking for. He was premeditated murder. Come on, that's
know what it is there.
And that's the misunderstanding of people. People were like, okay, he's getting charged with murder 3 or whatever it was. I think it was 3rd degree murder at first, and then they bumped it up. And people were like, I can't believe he's not getting charged with. It's like, dude, do you want him to win the case? Because if you say, hey, you're overcharging him, it's not 1st degree doesn't mean it's more severe. It just means it was premeditated. There's certain there's wickets you have to hit for that to be the charge. And if you don't hit those and you're overcharging them, and they're going to get off on it.
Yeah. The only thing that I want to happen through all of this is sanity. So let's just take the police officer aspect out of this. This is an emotionally charged event. It's heinous to watch. There is no good outcome out of this. Whether he was, in the totality of the circumstances, whether he was justified in using the force that he continued to use, and whether the facts show whether he contributed to his death or not, that's what the trial is for, right?
Yeah.
So take the police and emotional aspect out of it. It's a horrible, tragic circumstance that a man died while an officer was involved with that in any fashion, right? That sucks for everybody involved with that. But within days, I see the comedian Kevin Hart walking around his backyard, demanding that person be charged with a higher crime, right? What on earth, in a legal justice system, how is that conscionable? If one of my family members is killed at the hands of anybody, law enforcement, non-law enforcement, and I'm demanding justice. Justice is one thing, but demanding other charges be filed. And enough influential people did that. If that colored the charging, you're exactly right. They're going to lose that case because they overcharged them. And they submitted to that mounting pressure, which was obviously tremendous. And if they went outside of what the facts show, then they're going to lose that case simply off that. But what society do we want to have where we don't let the legal system do its job? And I'm part of that system. I've been much more a part of it than any person that I've seen a video from, right? All of those people have not been through the justice system the way that I have. I've worked in corrections, so I've seen pre-trial, mid-trial, post-trial. I've been involved in cases where I was deemed the investigating officer, which means I get to sit through jury selection. I get to sit through the entire court case all the way through the end. Typically, as an officer, we come in as a witness. We go in, we give our testimony, we leave. We don't have any idea what's happening the rest of the time. But as an investigating officer, when you're deemed that, you get to sit and watch the whole thing. So I've watched all of it. And as flawed and ineffective and bloated and slow as that process is, I can't point to a legal system in the world that I would rather be more a part of, especially from the criminal side. Watching inmates and having very frank discussions. I think I learned the most in my career right at the end of it, actually, when I went into the jail, from inmates and their lives, and especially the one of the areas I worked in was with prison inmates that in California are now serving their time in county
jails.
Yeah. AB 109. It's an awesome system. Those guys have their whole life has been involved in the criminal justice system. They are repeat offenders of the highest degree. And listening to them talk and listening to them as they work through their cases, they're very open with me about it because I have no care about it. And, not telling me anything I wouldn't have access to.
The case has already been decided. They're already there.
Way through it. No, the even pretrial stuff.
Okay.
Trial. When they're going through all their different hearings and everything, not just serving their sentences and stuff. It's incredibly interesting to listen to them, and the things available to them for their defense is staggering. I honestly cannot point to a criminal justice system that I personally know of anywhere else in the world that has the defendant's rights in mind more than our justice system. I mean, the whole Constitution. A large sections of it are around protecting your rights, the rights of search and seizures, not self-incrimination, the all the different stuff that is in the Constitution's escaping me right this moment.
No, for me, I think one of the biggest problems is that people and the problems that we have with the legal system is that not enough normal people understand the legal system. Like, you don't know anything about it until you have to know anything about it. Is how most people are. I have been arrested, and I didn't know some of the stuff that I could have fought back on some things that I didn't realize until in school I took business law, and that right there is basically a intro to law kind of class, and it teaches you all these different things, and you learn about interactions with police officers and stuff like that, and how they can't come to the defense or anything. Nothing they say is used for the defense, stuff like that. And it's I think there's just a huge misunderstanding, and that's where you get these overcharging and you get these hysterical okay, so an example, instead of following the Constitution, like in St. Louis right now, that rich couple that were defending their property with their firearms from a mob that broke down a gate and came into this gated community. Hate them because they're rich if you want, but it's still their right to protect their property, and hate their firearm, handling as much as you want, and douchebagness that it kind of looked like, but they still have the right to defend their property. And now that DA, who I guess is known to be very political, has charged them and had their firearms removed from their home. Yeah. And it's that's a direct violation of the Second Amendment. How can that even be? And from my understanding that in Missouri, the Castle Doctrine is they give them a lot of leeway for homeowners and property owners to defend and protect their property. Sure. So I don't think that's gonna go well for those guys, but it's
they're at the best statement on the article I read, the very last paragraph of it. He said, if you think that charging two attorneys with what they've charged,
they're attorneys too,
he goes, it's going to be the quote was, it's going to be an absolute shit show. And I was like, man, that's the attorney I want. But what better circumstances could you possibly have for defending your property? It's not defending my property. It's they broke down my gate and are chanting at me, I'm going to kill you, burn your house down. And you're like, the fuck you are. And you have a standoff with them. Nothing happens. And that's it. Now, if it's a prohibited weapon or anything like that, that's all remains to be seen. But why are they in with what's going on right now? Why are they even investigating it? Unless you looked at that thing and go, in California, you look at that thing and go, you're not supposed to have that, sir, in California, unless there's something else that you have.
Where's your bullet button? Where's your 10-round attached magazine?
Yeah, I go walk
bullshit.
Barrett 50 cal, I'm fucking done. But that and it's a non-event. The protesters broke in, threatened all this stuff. They came out there with their pink polo shirts on and her little pea shooter thing, and they had a standoff, and that crowd moved the fuck on. Okay, let's go back to the rest of the world that actually has shit to investigate.
Yeah.
Doing that, I agree with that attorney. It's gonna be a shit show. It's for sure. What the hell were you thinking?
I think you're going to see the same kind of scenario play out too for that mom that was
Oh yeah.
I think bumped into the girl, and then like a shouting match ensued, and she was like apologetic for like a couple minutes. Like if you watch the full video, it's like 5 or 6 minutes long, and it's like, hey, I'm sorry, da, 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 you know, like just completely apologetic and just trying to get out of there. And then getting in the car, and then they wouldn't let them leave and smacking their windows and stuff like that. Then she gets out and just goes, get the fuck away, you know, like pulls a gun and goes crazy. And I'll say goes crazy. I don't want to, you know, put it out like that, but she was a little overzealous with how she presented herself. However, I can see the argument that people have when you see so many videos on Instagram and on, you know, Facebook and YouTube and everything else of people getting dragged out of their cars. Like an instance where they're just driving through an area, suddenly they're caught up in a protest or whatever. There's videos of people being shot in their car. There's videos of people being attacked in their car. And I don't necessarily think that she should have pulled the gun, or if she did pull it, it shouldn't have been pointed necessarily. It should have been like, hey, I have this and I'm protecting myself. Get the fuck back so we can leave. Because that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to leave and they wouldn't let them. So then she stepped out. So was she in her right? Well, the courts will decide. I don't think they should have came in and arrested them and taken their guns like that, though. I think that was...
Oh, did they?
I want to say that they took their guns as well. And again, I think she was overzealous for how she reacted. However, you can make the defense that, you know, with the current climate in this country where there are literally videos all the way up to truck drivers, man. People are bum rushing semis and trying to jump in and pull dudes out of their cabs and shit like that. And it's just like, dude, how can you not defend yourself? How can you get in trouble for defending yourself in a situation like that where you're trying to leave? I'm trying to leave the situation. I'm de-escalating, and you are keeping this going longer than it should have been. I just think that's going to get quickly smashed to, you know, similar to the other one.
Wholeheartedly agree. You know, there's a difference between shutting down an interstate for a peaceful protest. It is still a violation of the law to do that. However, if the jurisdiction is going to allow it, they shut down the freeway. You stand there. You're stuck in traffic. That sucks. Wait till they leave, and then you drive on. Pulling Reginald Denny out of his truck back during those riots, everything. That would be what I would point to right off the bat and saying that is a byproduct. And then they would go, okay, well, those are all those protests. Look at all these years. Nothing like that has happened. You're right. In the beginning, now that changed. They are dragging people out of their cars. It's getting extremely violent mob mentality. And you're going to see these things keep occurring. People are going to keep running people over because you're like, I am not stopping my car. The likelihood of me being very, very violently harmed is high. And you can't even say, okay, well, then just stay in your car. They're breaking windows and dragging them out. They're breaking windows, opening the door and dragging them out. Like, you're not safe in your car just because it's not an armored car, you know?
Yeah.
That lady right there in that circumstance, you know, did everything you could ask for a civilian with no training to de-escalate a situation. On top of the fact that I heard she was pregnant. I don't know if that's fact.
I've heard that as well. I don't know either.
So she tries to de-escalate in as softening, you know, like de-escalating technique as you could humanly do. And then they sprint behind her car and fake being hit by it. And that's where you're like, are you now setting me? Because if you start screaming that they just ran me over, I would say, I knew what she's trying to do, and I saw the reaction of the crowd around it screaming, you just hit her with your car, and then they're coming. And that's where the justification of, I then stepped out of my car and told everybody back the fuck off. And I'm trying to remember the video. I don't remember her actually pointing at anybody, like straight on. She had it kind of in a higher low ready. The only thing I'm even going to falter for at this is not carrying one in the fucking chamber, like pulling it out and having to rack it. I'm like, oh, somebody please put her firearms training. Like, if you're going to carry a firearm and then employ it, that just shows that maybe you don't have the training behind it that you should. But
I think some people do that, though. I think some people don't. Which, you know, agree or disagree. I tend to disagree. I'm with you. You know, you know, if you're going to carry it loaded. But I think some people use that as like a intimidation kind of thing. Like maybe that's one like, hey, you saw me just put one in the chamber. Now I'm fucking serious. You know. But I understand the situation where I need it now. I don't have time to do that, or that's like very obvious when you do that, you know.
Sure. Yeah. Like the old racking the shotgun, you know.
Yeah.
Like, you rack the old shotgun. Well, are you doing that for effect, or are you doing that because, hey, I have a fucking shotgun. If this gets dicey, I'm going to kill you with it. Like, that's where you then start to turn that coin and go, okay, if you're doing things like that, then you're brandishing a weapon, and that is illegal to do. and using it as a deterrent and saying, I fear for my life, and if situation de-escalates even more, I'm going to use it, and pulling the fucking thing out and waving it so everybody knows you have a gun, that's brandishing. They're two different circumstances. One's against the law, one is not. And so based on what I saw, and that's all we can go off of, and based on the fear written all over her, and when you said she was acting crazy, it's like, yeah, we don't want to label her as that, but I know exactly what you're saying. She came unhinged because of the fear. She wasn't that afraid before she got out of the car, right?
No.
It really bad for them when they ran behind the car and faked being hit by the car.
Mm-hmm.
And I only infer that they're doing that to incite the mob that's also surrounding them. Because you can hear in the video, everybody then starts going off. It was de-escalating. They're backing away. They could have just fucking drove away. And that person chose to run behind the car and claim that they had been hit. And then you see the entirety of that crowd change. And you see that woman's response when she gets out of the car. You can make the argument of like, why are you getting out of the car? But in her defense, she's like, I tried driving away and you disallowed that. I have to now go on the offensive and clear space for me and have a mechanism to do that.
Yeah,
and you see it change in her when she's doing that. Now the fear is real, written all in her voice, in her face, as far as, I think you're going to all fucking attack me. So
yeah, it was weird. It was like, I wasn't sure if she was just kind of like, super like, that the adrenaline had to have been crazy for her, because that's obviously not a situation she's in on the regular, so it's definitely a different situation. I wasn't sure if she was just trying to command the situation, like use my loud voice and like, get back, and it just came off like, oh shit, she's,
yeah,
it's a bad thing. But hey, man, she had two kids in the back of the car too. There was two kids in the car as well. So it wasn't just her and her husband. It was like her husband, two kids, and she might have been pregnant. I don't know if that's true or not, but there were two kids in the car. And it's like, man, I can't blame her for trying to defend herself, especially after you watch the entire video and see how apologetic she was, how they were like, hey, we're just, this is so sorry. And when they were even being, shitty back to her, she's like, look, I'm sorry you feel like this. I'm sorry someone's treated you where you think this is, you think this is that kind of situation where it's like a racist situation or whatever. Right. But that's not, that's not the case here. And it was just, I don't know. It was crazy.
And calling into question whether she actually bumped into the girl as alleged, because if you're going to run behind a car and lie about being struck by it, are you now lying about bumping into a teenager to precipitate a fight? That lady never said. She's just like, I'm sorry. She's never really said, I know I bumped into you. So I call into question if that even occurred. I think the bigger issue with all of this is we're all because of this stuff getting rammed down our throats in every conceivable fashion on all platforms. We're rushing to judgment based on almost no actual facts. I'm as guilty of it as anybody. I watched that initial snippet of that video and was like, what the fuck is she doing? Why has she got a gun out? Like, you're done. Like, that's real bad. And then I see the whole video a couple days later and you're like, oh.
Exactly. That's the only part they show, is the part where she's like losing it on him, and it's like, whoa, she's a psycho. And then you're like, wait, she's just defending herself.
The biggest example that I can think of just right off the top of my head is those kids that were back in D.C. like a year or so ago that the protesters were.
Oh, yeah. The Covington Catholic kids.
Out of proportion. And then you watch the video and like, nothing is happening.
That kid literally stood there and everyone walked up to him. He didn't even do anything.
And I'm like, what teenage kid has that wherewithal to stand there and fucking take that? Like, me and most of my friends at that age would have been like, let's fucking brawl. Like, we would have been a fist fight. He stood there and take it. And hopefully, through the justice system doing its job, the kid's going to be a fucking multimillionaire all said.
Oh, he already is. CNN had to settle with them because of the amount of coverage, negative coverage, and how they spun the story that was against him. They already had they filed a lawsuit. I think they filed like $100 million or something like that. It's a huge amount. And CNN settled out of court. Because they weren't going to take it to trial, because they knew they were going to lose it, because it was like, dude, you guys were like vilifying them, like they, before the story, and they even had the dude come on And I give his side of the story, and he was all like, "Yeah, I don't know." That whole thing was fucked up. Plus the dude was like a deserter from the military or something like that. Like I think he was in the Marine Corps and he got caught or got kicked out. And they were like, "He's a veteran." It's like, dude, he talked about being a Vietnam veteran, and it was like he was in there in Vietnam but got kicked out, never deployed overseas, never did any of that. So he was trying to use that as leverage, but at the same time, stolen valor, like.
Right.
All this, we're in such a weird situation, man, where we have these instances, and even in the case where like the police are wrong, right? Let's look at, like, I think it was Washington D.C. It might have been, you know what? I actually think it was New York, where the old dude got pushed over, right? The old dude got pushed over and he fell and he hit his head.
Yeah.
And you can see the blood running out of his head, and the cops are just walking by him. It's like, okay, dude, that's fucked up. Like, one, maybe you can justify you bumped into him and he fell over. He's a feeble old man. I can't imagine it took much to knock him over. But once that happened, that part can be investigated. Once that happened, someone should have been like, "Hey, are you okay?" and like took care of him. And I can see the other side of people are like, "What the fuck? That was fucked up." And they did fire I think they fired like 4 police officers for that. Yeah. And then what kind of made me mad though was, in response to that, I think the police department said they were no longer going to cover, because those dudes were all SWAT guys. That was a group of SWAT guys.
Yeah.
They were no longer going to cover their legal fees for any instances that they got into while out working during the riots.
Right.
And so like 50 of them were like, "Fuck this. I am turning in my, like, I'm no longer SWAT. Like, I'm on the regular police force now. I'll just be regular police, but I'm not doing the SWAT because you're asking me to come out here and do a job, but now you're not going to cover me, like the qualified immunity."
Yeah.
But the news covered it as 50-something police officers walk off the job in support of so-and-so, of these 4 other dudes. And it's like, no, dude, they left because they weren't going to go out and be asked to do crowd control. And then when they get sued because of whatever happens during the riots, that they're going to have to cover their own legal fees. Fuck that. I wouldn't do it either. I would have walked off too. But I just hate that if you saw that, if people listening or watching this, tell me, if you saw that in the news and it didn't say that they walked off in support of these other dudes, and not the actual fact that they walked off because they were no longer going to have their legal fees paid for by the police department. They were going to be forced to pay for it themselves. And that's fucked up. The dude getting knocked over, hurting his head, bleeding out, bleeding on the ground right there, that was fucked up, and someone should have helped them. But at the same time, you can't fuck your police officers like that and then spin the story that they're all bad because they wanted that to happen. It's like, that's so messed up, man.
So let's talk about that incident, because I try to be as unemotional as a human can possibly be during this, and it's you can't. But I'm trying to look at things objectively. Obviously, I understand my own biases based on my profession. That's going to be there. I can't go back in time and stop, right? So, but I look at that and go, okay, so let's just go through this as though this was an investigation and into the use of force and how that actually occurred. Because I've watched enough videos now. I've got as total a picture as somebody that's not privy to all the stuff is. I have this knowledge. So calling him a feeble old man is not actually accurate. He's not unsteady on his feet. He's quite capable of going to these protests regularly. He's known for that. And his Facebook stuff, he is an instigator type mentality and had been doing that throughout the day. In fact, there's video of him earlier, and some of the protesters were like, that dude's a little unhinged. Like, he ain't with us, right? So you are now in a space where the mayor has declared there is a curfew, and they have said that you need to now vacate this area because you are violating the curfew. Those are all rules that have to be followed. Whether you agree with them or not, you can challenge them in court and say it's not constitutional for you to do X, Y, Z. But that is the rule of law. There, again, multiple layers. It's not the cops saying, we decided all these people got to go, which happens quite regularly in riot situations. They have to control crowds as best as possible and behind it. But that decree of the curfew is coming from the mayor saying this can't happen anymore because I need to get some control back. And then the law enforcement is tasked with enforcing that curfew. And so they're saying you need to vacate the area. And as they're moving forward in riot formation, he decides to go confront them. And he's not a feeble old man in the fact that he's carrying a helmet with him. Like, if my grandpa went to see what was going on at a protest, he ain't carrying a helmet with him to be like, because I'm going to take shit.
Yeah, he's not a casual observer. He's involved in the whole thing.
guy's
But
doing
he's
here.
still an 80-something-year-old guy in front of like 20-something. Compared to like a 25-year-old police officer, he's a feeble old man.
Sure, and not to say that right or wrong, but I have gotten in a fight with a very old man, and he was incredibly strong.
Yeah, I'm not saying no ageism here. There are some strong old dudes out there.
Like old, young. So then it's like, okay, so what age do you get to violate the law and not do as you're told to vacate from an advance? These people are like, you got plenty of time to not walk up to us. He goes walking briskly up to them, sticks his hand out. Now, I'm not going to say I fully subscribe into what could have been happening, but there is evidence to suggest that on his phone, he could have been using it to capture stuff off of their radio stuff. There's technology that'll do that with all the Bluetooth stuff in their radios. They can actually capture coded information off their radios and their personal cell phones simply by tapping it. And if
so like getting through the encryption on it.
Yes, that you can put crap on your phone that will pull information off somebody else's phone. And he's actually touching his phone to them. Now, whether he's actually doing that or he's got his camera on and now he's just kind of an old man just doing whatever, he is putting his hand out to touch them, and they give him a shove, right? Like, this is the shove to get back. Well, he wasn't as steady on his feet as he should have been to be doing that. And I also looked at how he moved. I played it over and over and over again. And how he actually fell was not indicative of I'm old and feeble. It's like I over-exaggerated this and fell down. And I don't know whether he meant to smack his head that hard, but he smacked it really hard.
Yeah.
But
the blood was running out of his head.
There's some suggestions to say that was actually staged, the blood coming out of his ears. Because about trauma, and it's a super grainy photo. Again, I'm not buying into that whole like thing, but it is out there saying that there was tubing running up there that was like simulated blood. So just talk about it from a medical standpoint.
That's extreme crazy. If you get to the point where you're putting on props to make the
Sure.
cops look even worse like that, that's an extreme level of crazy.
Sure. But we see videos of people, like air shoved and they flop over.
Yeah.
Teachers,
You're like soccer players, just get bumped barely. It's like, oh God,
yeah,
you broke my leg.
Soccer players all day long, or the fake seizure feature. Like, I can't count how many people have faked a seizure to not go to jail, and you're like, you're not having a seizure. They're like, I'm so having a seizure, and you're like, well, you don't talk when you're having a seizure. But so let's say all of that aside. What I know medically, from a medical standpoint, like very little medical training, but I have been in EMT twice. Striking the back of your head generally does not produce immediate blood flow from your ears. Blood coming out of your ears is an incredibly bad sign of a skull fracture, right? And there's video of him sitting up with his head bandaged, and he's on the phone going in the ambulance. Those two things typically don't marry up. Like, having a depressed skull fracture that causes you to bleed out of your ears and talking on a cell phone moments later probably aren't happening, right? But
I didn't know it was coming out of his ears. I thought it was coming out of the back of his head. I thought he just like landed and
it's not from behind his head. It's coming out of the ears.
Okay.
So then on top of that, okay, so he falls down, and the one guy does go down to actually start to do something with him, and the guy next to him says, keep moving. That is what you do when you in riot thing. The whole point of advancing forward is there cannot be any breaks in that line. As soon as that wall stops right there, there's a hole, and now people go flying through it. So that's what all the people behind you are for. So as you move forward, you might be like pushing people with shields, batoning people. If somebody needs to get arrested, they get grabbed and thrown behind you, and the arrest teams are behind you. The wall never breaks.
But it didn't seem like that kind of situation, though. It seemed like most of the crowd had moved back. He was like the only one that really hadn't, and they were moving pretty casually past him. And I think that's the hard part for people like me to see. Like, dude, come on. Like, I understand completely. Like, hey, get that first layer beyond him, and then pull him back and give some medical care or assess the situation. But no one even like messed with him. I'd have to see more video to get a full picture. Obviously, we are talking from, like everybody else, what we've seen on Facebook and Instagram, and they'll pull it out in the courts. But
to look at a video like that, as far as medical care, as soon as that other guy bends down and the guy next to him goes, no, keep moving, look at how fast the two medics behind him are actually rendering care. It's within,
I actually never saw a video long enough to show them rendering care, because why would they show them caring?
There's guys in fatigues. They might have actually been National Guard or a different team that was helping with it, but they're in the BDU colors that the military is using now. I forgot right off the top of my head.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
MARPAT, or not MARPAT, but yeah, multicam.
Yeah. Within, not 10 seconds, it's much less than that. They start rendering aid to him immediately.
Okay.
And they keep moving forward as they're supposed to. So, and then if you want to talk about it from like, okay, so that crowd maybe didn't justify the full, like, okay, well, we could break the gap and talk and deal with this guy. You're from the military, and you guys train in very specific ways for very specific things over and over and over and over again. And then when you're confronted with them in combat, you fall back on that training, and you wouldn't in those moments then decide, well, this engagement with the enemy isn't quite as bad as we've trained for, so let's violate those very specific policies and tactics we have in place because there's only 2 or 3 bad guys out here. So we can not do what we're trained to do because it's not as bad as 50 bad guys out there. That's
I know what you're saying. You're doing what you're told. You're moving beyond. I get that. Like I said, I didn't see a video where they were treating him, and that's my own limited.
Of the world.
I think the biggest point that people could probably take from these different instances that we've talked about is that they don't happen in a vacuum.
No.
It's not like the old dude just showed up randomly and they're like, "Hey, old man," and shove him over. Like, there's obviously things that led up to that situation, and
Sure.
I don't think enough people do a good people don't do a good enough job looking beyond the bullshit that gets put on social media just for like, oh my god, the shock factor stuff, and look like the couple minutes before that, and it's
he portrays too, like, look at those officers, they got a bunch of crap on. That guy, the old man, has a face mask on. I'm sure those officers, in the course of doing crowd control over days prior to that, have shoved a lot of people, and some dude just come up in your face and you're like, get back. And just from watching it from a human standpoint, that officer, I feel, genuinely was like, oh, fuck, once you realize, like, toppled over. And that's why you see him respond like, son of a bitch. Like, now I maybe realize he's older than he looked, and I shoved him and he flopped over, unlike the 100 other people I've shoved to get back from me, like, you can see humanity in him. And then the guy next to him, like, comes in and was like, don't forget what we're supposed to be doing. There's procedures for this. They got him. Like,
the medical team's got him. Yeah.
And I think you look at that and go, again, my whole thought in all of this is, let's just let sanity prevail. If we all just take a fucking step back, I think we all just need to go back to quarantine. I don't think we're locked down long enough. I think maybe we all need to go back into timeout because we weren't in our rooms and really thinking about what we did.
So that's what caused this, man. Part of that's why people are out. They say it's, I think part of the whole thing is just people are tired of being locked up, and this is a good reason to get out. Especially now, it seems like protesting is not illegal anymore. Like, I can get out and walk around with other people. Okay. Yeah. Like, I've been sitting in my apartment for 2 months. I'm going to get out and walk around.
Well, some of my buddies were talking about doing a group ride for our mountain bike group, and they're like, are we violating anything by doing this? They're like, I think we just call it a protest and we're good. So I don't know what protested exactly, but we can do it. So
that's the world we live in. Yeah, that's but like I said, I specifically wanted to bring up that third one, or the old man situation, just because I thought the coverage of how the force responded and what the officers did and their resigning was egregious. Like they did that because they were not going to, like, I wouldn't do it either. I wouldn't put myself in a situation where you're like, well, hey, I need you to fight off all these protesters, and if any of them sue you, you have to cover it yourself. Like, fuck you, dude. Why would I do that? That's ridiculous. And I just think it was miscovered, and I think there's so much misinformation out there for people, and I hope people hear this stuff and, like, use it to spur their own, like, curiosity to dig into some of these situations that they find intriguing,
Well, I think it's just important to look for the alternatives. If somebody is, man, we do it anywhere. If I walk onto a car lot and some dude is immediately trying to sell me that car, don't we look for the alternatives? Don't we look for where's the angle? Where's the thing? How am I getting sold? Am I getting juked on this thing? Why aren't we doing it in all of these circumstances? And not to get like full, conspiracy theory, like there's a big thing. I don't want to go to that level of we're all being locked down because the world is controlled by 4 people. And I don't do that. I just want to look for what is the logical alternative to what I'm being presented. And does it even remotely mirror what we're being sold? I looked at that incident that you talked about. I watched all the videos, and then I saw that headline of 57 people resign in solidarity with their guy. And obviously from my bias, I'm like, well, fuck yeah. Like, if you're going to charge these 2 dudes for doing that right there, we all don't want to do it, period. And then I read the follow-up of that the union saying, you will not be covered. We basically can't. If this is what's going to be happening, we can't continue to do this. We'll be bankrupt as far as so like.
Have you seen New York City police? As they said, they've had like over 500 applications for retirement come in, and they've I think they said they've canceled 2 of their police academy classes because there's just not people there for it.
Yeah. It's a rapidly devolving situation that the side pushing it has not weighed the consequences. They're looking at what the utopia is and believing that just because you will it into existence, it will happen. People will stop hurting each other. They also don't believe, like truly in their hearts, don't believe that there's evil in society, that there are truly evil, hurtful people out there that don't care about you. Like, that's so far from their frame of reality that they couldn't fathom it. And I've talked to and spent hours of my shift with people like that. And on face value, they're the nicest people. And I know what they've done. Like, some of them have alleged to be done because they're not through the criminal justice system. And others that have been convicted of, like, I know you're a really nice guy to talk to. But when push comes to shove, you do not have that other thing that humans have. You don't care about your fellow man. You don't care if you hurt somebody in the process of anything. You don't care about other people's property. You don't have that human thing that the people that are feeling this way have in excess. They view the world through the lens of, I couldn't fathom somebody being like that because I am not like that to the nth degree. And that those 2 viewpoints don't match up. And those people that are criminals mindset like that, they're just going to prey on that. There's no
look at Chaz. How many shootings were in that Chaz chop? Whatever they called it for a little bit, and now their city council just voted to defund the police almost, I think, over 50% or something like that. They've basically said, like, we're getting rid of our police force. So we're gonna see how that's gonna go in Seattle. And when people go, and they were already complaining in the Chaz area where there were crimes happening and people were calling the police, because I think they said there was 500 in that 4-block radius or 6-block radius or whatever it was. There's like 500 private, homes or whatever you want to call it in that area, apartments and stuff like that, and all the businesses, and crimes were happening, and people were calling the cops and they're like, hey, we're not coming, man. Like, this is. And when they did come for like a shooting, they got attacked. Like, the police got attacked because they were coming out to investigate a shooting that happened. And it's like,
they escort the fire department in there to take those people to the hospital. It's
crazy, man. What's blowing my mind is seeing this, like, anyone that grew up in like the 90s remembers like the anarchist movement. All that has done is switched over to Antifa, like what we called anarchist in the 90s, where they would, protest the WTO and have these giant riots and shit in Seattle and Portland and stuff like that. They were all anarchist, and they've just rebranded themselves that they're now Antifa. And like, somehow, I don't know, man, it's just crazy that these like mouth breather, basement dwelling people are having like an actual effect where people think that their suggestions are like right, and a lot of these dudes are based in communist bullshit, Marxist propaganda, not communist, Marxist propaganda, and that's where they're basing their beliefs on, and they're trying to, like you kind of alluded to at the beginning, there's a higher force behind it. There are definitely groups of people that are trying to fracture society and push this stuff, and it's just,
well, look at the
ridiculousness.
That have been interviewed within a matter of weeks on CNN and stuff, saying, we all agree enough with a veto-proof majority to go. That's not something you sat and was like, I watched this happen on video. what should we do about that? And then came to the conclusion that there shouldn't be any police. You've believed that for an extremely long time. The one lady actually stated publicly that was her running platform in 2017. So this has just, it's like you have those, like plans over here. I'm just waiting for this to happen. Something has to happen, because I'll sound crazy if I just say it in a vacuum. But when destabilizing events happen like this, they're opportunists and they come in. And I just read an article about, I think it's East Philadelphia or East Pittsburgh, somewhere. It's a little city that had its own police department, and they just disbanded it. And they were then turning over control and are believing that the state patrol state troopers are going to come now respond in the same thing.
Yeah.
I tell you, like, flat out, I work for two different agencies. One is a city police agency and one is a county sheriff's in the same jurisdiction. So the city was in the county that I ended up working for. The city has one of the best police departments in Northern California. It really, really is a progressive agency in Roseville. The city itself is extremely progressive. We have a mall there. They have done it right as a city as far as securing their long-term viability. And then they keep annexing to the west, which is county property. And the county keeps trying to fight that. They're like, but we want to retain that. And Roseville's like, yeah, but we have this many officers per capita. And the county's like, we got one that does the whole western county, And the agency's like, yeah, we'll have 3 people on duty just in that area alone, 24 hours a day. So you look at that and go, okay, so this little police agency had their police, and all it was supposed to do was take care of their little dinky town, city, whatever it was. They got rid of it and asked the state patrol to come in, expecting the same level of service. And the state patrol's like, yeah, we got a trooper covering a giant geographical area responding to crashes on the interstate, crimes involving things in unincorporated areas, and you are now just a part of the unincorporated area that we have to take under our umbrella. You will never receive that level. And they're already complaining about we're crimes raising, we're response times for calls days,
that's what happens, man. That's what happens when you defund and bring fewer people that can do their thing. I think a lot of people, the situation you're talking about, look at like Camden, New Jersey, because they did that. They defunded their city police department. They fired all the officers. But then what people don't talk about in the media is that the state troopers and the county sheriff actually hired back almost every one of those officers and cover that. They actually gained more officers. So now they have even more police, but they don't have a city police anymore. And now the sheriffs are covering that area. So when they say, well, Camden got rid of their police department, they're fine. It's like, no, they just, all they did was rebrand, they just put on a different color uniform, from blue to brown or whatever it is. And then they're doing the same shit, and it's like, they've actually have increased police presence,
You live in San Diego. I can't think of any off the top of my head. I only know the ones in Northern California, but there are cities in San Diego County that are contracted with San Diego County Sheriff to provide police services. The cars say that city name. The uniforms say that city name. You would believe that they're that city. It's up in Sacramento, Rancho Cordova PD. Those are Sac County employees. They're
okay.
Same in San Diego. I again don't know them off the top of my head, but I know they have contract cities where the cars say the city name, the employees say the city name, but they are San Diego County Sheriff's deputies providing contract services for. So what is what? Like, okay, so those cities can say, well, we defunded the police, and then those people would take those uniforms off. They would clear the decals off the car and go, okay, now you're back to being San Diego County Sheriffs. Keep driving around the same area, but the same level of service that those contract cities get.
Yeah, because now you're not having a group specifically focused on the city and a group specifically focused on the outlying areas of the county. Now that same group is doing all of it. Yeah. No, I know what you're saying, man. It's a weird world, man. It's I can see. I just can't. Growing up, thinking that, hey, man, being a police officer would be a cool job. Help the community, get to fight the bad guys. That's how you look at it as a little kid. Cops and robbers and stuff like that.
Right.
It's just like now, though, man, there's no respect. There's a lot of hate, and just for nothing, and to you're putting your family and your own livelihood on the line every time you go out the door. And a situation that may be, hey, this is what you're supposed to do in this situation, and you do it, can now be misconstrued and blown up, and now your like life is ruined, man. Imagine that dude in Georgia who got arrested, who shot the dude. You know, his life, even if he's cleared of it, and they're like, hey, yeah, that was completely fine. That was deadly force, and use of deadly force was appropriate. Yeah. Well, who the fuck is going to be able to trust that guy? That guy's face was on the news nationwide. You know, like people are going to know that name and stuff. There's going to be a stigma attached to that.
There was the guys involved in George Floyd's arrest that was charged, you know, one of the bystander officers that was charged, and there's a lady that recognized him in the store. He's actually grown out a beard and stuff, but she recognized him, and she's harassing him all through the store, saying he can't be there, he can't do this, he can't do that. Aaron Wilson, I think it was, that was involved in the Mike Brown incident in Ferguson. Like, he's no longer in law enforcement, and I'm sure he's gone.
Even though he was deemed to everything. So all the initial stories from that incident were proven to be false. Everything about it was false. The dude was he had strong arm robbery, and then followed up with trying to attack the police officer, and the police officer defended himself, and that's what happened. Whereas this whole hands up, don't shoot bullshit that's going around, dude, it's like how for me as someone, if I was an organizer, why would I even start with something like that where it has been proven false? You know, like what? And the whole Black Lives Matter thing, like, I think you can't find someone that says it does. They don't. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, you're going to find people that are going to say, hey, man, they do matter. However, I'm not going to support an organization that is a known Marxist organization, that they're self-admitted. And that is tainting the whole fucking movement for a lot of people. Like, when you say that, and a thing that I've brought up to many people is, for people that defend the Black Lives Matter organization, is like, well, they do good for the black community and stuff. I would challenge you to show me how much money that organization has donated to Joe Biden's campaign compared to what they have tried to do to help end actual slavery in Africa that's occurring right now. There is modern day slavery that is occurring right now. What is that organization doing to try to stop that? Because that is the ultimate sin, right? Putting another human being, in chains and making them work for you like that. But how much money of the donations that they've recently received went to go helping people like that, compared to, hey, we're going to throw money at Joe Biden's campaign so that he can beat Donald Trump? Like, that's that's the question I want to see.
To throw out a super inflammatory statement, all the people that I saw jump on, the Black Square Day, and all these affluent people that I know, mostly affluent white people that have the holier than thou attitude on, we're now going to jump on this thing and we're going to support something that you didn't do any research on. You don't know what their stated objectives are. Maybe even if you did and you agree with that, then you be careful what you wish for. Mm-hmm. And yet they all type that out on an iPhone that is basically built via some very nefarious, underprivileged, bordering on slave labor practices over there.
Yeah, the building where they make iPhones has nets around it so that to stop people from jumping to their death.
Yeah.
That's the kind of work environment that they're working in.
They're not paid a living wage. They're deplorable conditions. Or Nike, Nike's like on this bandwagon of everything. Where are your shoes made and under what conditions? Is that what you want to project to the world as uplifting and freedom? Except that you've offered just enough for these people to have to take your income, and you've trapped them in there. So sure, it's not slavery. They're not being forced to do it. But are they?
And you're abiding by that country's laws, but you only go there because that country's laws are way more lax than ours.
On this stuff is just so fucking insane. And when you were saying earlier about, people coming to these decisions and saying stuff and judging based off snippets of information, but everybody's an expert in everything. This would be the equivalent of me sitting at home and watching military operations go, I wouldn't do that way.
Can you believe that dude did that? Like,
yeah, like,
armchair quarterbacks.
I don't look at any other organization and go, why, like Disney, why are you putting out those movies? Why are you doing it? Like, there's not subjected to this level of, and I'm not saying that, again, we're public servants. We need to be held accountable to the public.
For sure, 100%.
I get it. And I don't think any police officer that I know in law enforcement believed otherwise. Like, you understand it very clearly because we've seen friends get arrested for doing stupid shit. We've seen, it all comes back to you really quickly when you realize you can get in trouble for a lot of shit, and you better like do your job well. For most progressive agencies, you know, and especially in this modern era of bigger agencies, like you will probably get in trouble on a greater likelihood than most everything else. But the people making these decisions have no absolute basic, in fact, and I'll put the head of that out there because it's the Democratic presumptive nominee. Joe Biden is saying shouldn't have to shoot somebody like that. They should just shoot him in the leg. And as a trained professional that's been involved in an on-duty shooting,
people are idiots, man.
The audacity of saying that, and I've been asked that by a lot of friends.
I saw someone comment that today on Facebook, and I almost responded, but I'm like, you know what, man, I'm not even going to get into an online argument with someone that ignorant. It's like, dude, you have arteries running through your legs. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're retarded.
Probably on your body, other than your dome, is in that pelvic region right there. So that as an aiming point, if you could even hope to hit it during a moving gunfight, would be like that is actually a training technique because it is deadly force we're using, and we're trying to stop a deadly threat. So in doing that, like to the maximum effectiveness, there is a target area of the pelvic girdle because of everything that it does for your body and the volume of blood flow that goes through there. Because it's such it could be such a fatal area, and stopping that threat just from a structural issue of taking the pelvic out. But if I want to get shot in the arm or the chest versus my upper thigh, like I'll choose the arm and the chest all day long. So the audacity of that stuff, but you hear people throwing that out, and the well-meaning people that are saying it on Facebook or reaching out to me and asking it, they truly believe that as though it's an option. You know, like, well, why couldn't they just shoot the gun out of their hand? That's the old thing. That's kind of Westerns aren't out there that much doing it. But it's now that whole thing of when Joe Biden says something like that, there are millions of people that go, yeah,
why can't they just shoot him in the leg? I had a lady the other day on Facebook was like, why don't they shoot him in the kneecap? That'll stop him, and it won't kill him. And I'm like, you're an idiot. Like, can you imagine trying to aim for a kneecap if someone's running away from you? You know, like...
Just earlier in the conversation, we were talking about the fact that at least 2 of the rounds during that shooting in Georgia did not hit the suspect and hit cars behind him. And they're aiming center mass at the largest...
At a big dude.
And you're still missing. So now give me something that's like even smaller and moves faster on. Like, so you look at those statements and go, these are being perpetrated by people that don't even have the foggiest idea of what they're talking about. And they're if you say it and you just say it and everybody goes, ha ha ha, Joe, yeah, whatever.
Crazy old Joe.
Yeah, take him back to the home. Like, he's had enough for today. If you just looked at that and went like, that guy's crazy, whatever. It's just my Uncle Joe. Nobody cares. But that is the Democratic nominee saying that and driving policy behind it. People listen to that. People in government situations, whether it be a local city council person all the way up to him, potentially the president of the United States, that are believing that is a possibility, and they're driving policy based on that. That is the frightening part of it, because if you look at that,
he's a thought leader in his community, you know, and people are buying into it, and it's just, it's ridiculous, man. I see it, and I'm like, I get it. You don't understand about firearms and stuff, but you're right. If you're a thought leader in your community and you're putting that out there, and you're like a presidential nominee, and you're saying something like that, like, you should know what you're talking about. I get it. You can't know everything about everything, but I feel like at some point, you know, you should know that's not a good idea. Like, or trying to even, like, the ridiculousness of even saying that, like, well, we should just shoot him in the leg instead of, you know, like, get the fuck out of here, dude. That's crazy.
Yeah. Everybody thought he was just crazy Uncle Joe when he was talking about the whole shotgun thing. Just have a shotgun, and, you know, that's all you need. You don't need an AR. Everybody's like, ha. And then he doubled down on it by, you just shoot him in the leg, you know? And you're like, okay, well, you don't even understand what use of force. Like, you shouldn't even comment on something that you don't understand everything behind it. Let's take the gun side out of it, like the ability to even hit somebody in the leg. Just the actual, we had a whole conversation about use of force. If it's deadly force, it's deadly force. If you're saying we're not going to allow deadly force, but by shooting him in the leg, it's less likely to cause them to die, well, you're suggesting something that actually has a higher instance of causing them to die. So where do you stand on this whole thing?
Clear that up for sure.
one of the big things being talked about in California right now, because the Attorney General just put out a bunch of suggestions, I guess you could call them at this point. They are not policies or anything like that. One of them is changing police canines to find and bark. And it doesn't say specifically, and a lot of my colleagues in that profession are looking at it and going back to the days of find and bark dogs. LAPD still has that policy, meaning if the dog locates a passive suspect, it's trained to bark at that until the suspect does something aggressive towards the dog. And if the dog bites, it's because that person precipitated the dog doing it. That is still LAPD's bite policy in a broad nutshell. That's not what I think he's proposing. What I think he's proposing is dogs will not actually ever be trained to bite. Like, you would take them all out and replace them with dogs that just find suspects and then bark and go, he's over here, and nothing else happens as a
I think you'll see a lot more dogs get killed. I think that's what will happen from that.
Right on. Yeah. And then on top of that, again, to track back to a use of force, statistically, the biggest apprehension is that dog is a deterrent. That dog locates somebody, and because they're on a long line or the person's hiding where they're not accessible to the dog, the dog locates them and then come out, or we're going to let the dog bite you. The guy's like, fuck that, I don't want to get bit. That's a non-bite apprehension, it's called. And so there's countless of those are far more prevalent than the actual bites, in my experience, having witnessed them, been involved in them, watching the stats from our agencies, countless ones of those. And then what else you'll take away as a deterrent is you'll take a deterrent away from in the middle of the night when you're out by yourself and you got some less than savory characters sitting there that have violent histories. They're sitting there, and that dog is barking in the back of that car, and they go peacefully with you handcuffed and didn't ever fight. You can never quantify how many times that dog prevented all the officers present and that suspect from being harmed during something where they're like, I don't want to get bit by that fucking dog. I ain't gonna even fuck
Can't
around.
they employ the dog like with a little popper? Don't they have like a popper or something where they can let them out of the car? Yeah. So they don't even have to be there to actually let them out. If something happens, they can just hit the button and fight with the suspect.
Yeah, and those guys all know that. They know those dogs can be deployed out of that car. Sometimes, depending on the agency, if you're a cover officer and the dudes are like really, really like known folks and have a high propensity for violence, you can take the dog out and just have it laying next to you. That's that keeps everybody honest. That's like, you can say that's intimidation tactics. You can look at it, I would go, depending on the circumstances and who we're dealing with, you're goddamn right it is. Like, you should understand what's going to happen and what tool I have available here to keep you from doing what you've proven historically capable of doing. That's what I look at and go, like, somebody with a criminal history, it's not who they are today, it's what they have the potential because they've shown in the past, which is what happened to that guy in Georgia, in Atlanta. His history was what he has done. He could have been a different person. That he could have gone with that entire 47-minute thing, been handcuffed peacefully, and he'd be sitting in jail, or he'd probably be out of bail at this point, actually, for a DUI. And that's so all he did was continue what his history showed he was up until that point. So that dog is a huge deterrent for that. And if you take that away, because now you've just replaced them with a simple locating tool, which they'll probably move to labs and things like that because they're way easier to deal with. And if you're not training them to bite people, let's just get labs and bloodhounds to sniff them out. That deterrent goes away. And what have you just caused? That's again, like looking at the totality of everything that people are proposing and going, what are the side effects of saying that? I would love to live in a world where dogs weren't needed to find and apprehend violent fucking criminals. But that's not the world I lived in for over 20 years. And the apprehensions I was involved in, I'm 100% thankful that that dog found the person where they were, because we couldn't find them. One specifically was an armed robbery suspect from in a stolen car and foot-bailed over a bunch of fences in a neighborhood, and he was hiding in the bushes of a person's front yard. And there was officers standing in the yard where he was hiding. They didn't know he was there. The dog tracked him through all the backyards, tracked him up the thing, dove in those bushes and grabbed him by the shoulder and drug him out. And we're like, okay. And had we all done our best searching around, maybe we found him, maybe we didn't. He's in somebody's yard, like in the middle of the night. That we just leave and go, okay, we didn't find him. And and that person wasn't giving up just because we were all there. So what's the alternative to that is we might all find out. I have this feeling, I've been saying it for a while to friends that keep asking me about stuff, is my general feeling on this is I'm kind of tired of trying to change people's minds. I'm just like, let's get it on. Let's just, like, it's coming so fast. I could not have predicted it would have happened like this, but it's going to be something. It's got to get worse before it gets better. The people that believe the things that are being perpetrated out there have to see with their own eyes and suffer the consequences of their beliefs for it to change. Because you can say defund the police and you can get away with it, and you could probably do it because you don't know what will happen. All of us, you and your listeners and me and my colleagues and that, we know. We know from experience, and we know from belief what will be a byproduct of that, and we won't be proven wrong, because the little snippets that we've gotten, previews of Chaz and things like that. You had a chance up there in Seattle to take over a little space, make it a utopia, and what happened? Exactly what we all know is going to happen.
Yeah, you have armed people running that area. Now it's no longer people that are accountable to anybody. It's someone that picked up a gun and got a group of people and like, all right, we're the police now. Like, what? That's a warlord, society. That's not how we're not living in some kind of tribal society,
What I think is some of the most inspiring stuff that I'm seeing is people protesting, counter protesters, and then people on the original protest standing up for the counter protesters. There's two incidents I can think of. One lady down in Southern California somewhere, she's standing there holding a sign like defend the police or Blue Lives Matter, and the crowd is coming after her, trying to rip down her sign. And there's people that were there on that protest side protecting her. Mm-hmm. And that is inspiring to see. And then just recently a video popped up of a guy. Now, granted, he's being inflammatory. The guy's got bigger balls than a fucking basketball. He's walking through an Antifa rally with a Trump hat on, or the MAGA hat on, the Trump shirt, carrying the flag. And he's an old dude. Like, he must be fucking salty. And he's just simply walking around. And they keep trying to rip the flag away from him. Somebody actually does rip the flag away and goes running off into the crowd. Somebody chased him down, got the flag back, gave it back to him. And those protesters were escorting him around and shielding him at different times and standing up for his First Amendment rights to counter their First Amendment rights. And that and go, like, maybe there is hope. Maybe
for sure.
Those are beautiful moments. He had the right to be there. They had the right to be there. They both didn't like each other's presence, but they moved through it. And that's
it's one of those, like, I may not agree with you, but I do agree with the fact that you should be able to express it. And I think along with that, I think this whole thing, if anything I think this will stir up the average person to take a hard look at who is getting elected in local elections and actually get out and vote, because it does make a big deal. Because when your city council votes to defund the police, you can't stop that. You let them get elected. You know what I'm saying? Or if they don't defund the police, you can't stop that. You let them get elected. It's like whatever whatever side of the line you fall on, get out and vote and fucking make a difference. Because if you don't, you're letting everyone else that is voting make the decisions, and then you can't. How are you going to complain about it when you let some radical fucking person get into office, like in Seattle? Because the person that started the whole Chaz thing was one of the city council members, opened up the city council building, was like, take it. And she's a self-proclaimed socialist. She ran as a socialist, and it was all good. It was all the summer of love. It's going to be good. Chaz is great. It was all great until that same fucking woman marched the protesters down to the mayor's actual house and started, spray painting her house and shit. And then the mayor was like, well, this has gone too far. Now we're going to tear this down. And it's like, oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Once it's come to your footstep, now it's gone too far. Forget all those people that have been, trying to live in that area for the last 2 weeks or however long it was. Forget, their complaints and concerns and stuff like that, and you just let it go by the wayside. But once they come to your house, now it's a big deal. And it's like, dude.
My point exactly. It has to get worse before it can get better. The mayor of Seattle, I would have to assume, is a fairly liberal person. And even that person was like, you guys went too far. Like I'm all for this, but that's too much fucking
Her argument was like, well, I used to be a prosecutor, so my home address is supposed to be classified, and the city councilwoman knows that, and she shouldn't have brought this group here because it endangers me and my family. It's like, what do you think it does to the families of the people that are in that area that they've taken over and you've just allowed them to fucking be? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's crazy.
On top of it, there's Google. I could find her address right now for less than $30, I guarantee you.
Yeah.
And which is from law enforcement, we used to have confidentiality on our plates. You had to fill out a form through DMV, and when you ran the plate, it would not come back with that information. That all mattered before Google. I did it when I first got into law enforcement because there was no Google and you couldn't find shit like that. And so, yeah, I didn't want people I arrested being able to access stuff off my license plate. Once all that stuff, once you could search for public records online and find most anything for free, or if you pay those fees and you get all of the public records, I haven't done that in fucking 15 years because they'd find your house like that. That's
I know what you're talking about too. I remember back like a newer internet where you could find, I mean, you could still find stuff for everybody, but the organizations that you can pay and they'll, dig up all the records and stuff.
It's got, if you own a house, you're on the title. It shows. Like it shows the addresses listed on all of your IRS forms. Like I have ran my name before through the non-paid side. It shows a list of every address I've had in the life. What's that?
I'm not a homeowner, but I'm pretty sure too, if you own a house, that anyone can access your social security number too, because it's on the public records of you. I think I learned that in my business law classes, something with that. I don't know though. But
yeah.
Man, what a world though. Like I said at the beginning, we had just gotten put in the lockdown and everything just kind of blew up afterwards. So it was good catching up with you and stuff. I'd like you to take a few minutes or however long you'd like and talk about your business again. That way we can get the word out about your canine training service and stuff like that. So if you want, what's been new with Gold Hill Canine?
Well, first off, let's address the fact I'm sorry for the loss of your dog. That seems kind of like I'm not sure if you've talked about it yet with other people publicly in this, and if you let me know if you don't want.
No, you're good, man. It was we were setting up. I was set up. I actually had all this set up to do my interview with you, and he had a cough for the last I don't know, for a couple days he had a cough. And I'm like, I was looking online. It was saying, hey, it could be kennel cough. As long as it's a dry cough, it's not a big deal. Once it starts getting like phlegmy or something like that, you need to get him looked at. And then, I'm sorry?
How old was he?
13. So he's an older dog. You know? So anyway, we were sitting here and I had already reached out. I mean, I just moved to San Diego at the beginning of the year and from Oceanside. So I moved south, and then I got him back from my ex, so I had him full-time at that point, because the other place I had, you weren't allowed to have dogs, and I got caught with them once, so I was like, fuck, until I get a new place, hold on to him. So I'd gotten him back, and his vet is in Oceanside, his normal vet. So I was like, man, I need to get him looked at. Like, he's starting to have some breathing problems. Like, his breathing's getting a little labored. So I'm like, that's not a good sign. So I got online, and they have like an online reservation for his normal vet, because I was like, well, I'm going up there anyway. I'll see if I can get an appointment for after our interview. I was hoping for after our interview or the following day. And so I put in an online appointment request, and I was waiting to hear back from them which one was good. And we were getting ready to start our interview, and I'm sitting here, and I'm looking over at him, and he's breathing real hard. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, and I could see his stomach, he's forcing with his stomach. So I'm like, okay, now it's real bad, because he's not getting enough air. And I looked at his gums, and his gums were starting to become discolored. So I knew his oxygen deprivation. For those that don't know, if their gums start turning like a bluish color, then they don't have enough air. And it wasn't like blue, but it was like, oh shit, like I need to get him to the vet. Sure. So I threw him in the car. I didn't throw him in the car. I picked him up. Took him to a local vet here, not too far away. And luckily, I got right up there. There was no one in line. The whole COVID-19 thing, everyone has to line up outside. And I've driven by that vet before, and I've seen like a line down the sidewalk. And in that situation, I don't know. What do? Run past everyone and be like, hey, my dog's sick. I need you to, because everyone's going to be like, my dog's sick too. Luckily, I pulled up, and there was one person in line. They were getting checked in. And as soon as they finished, I'm like, hey, man, my dog's breathing, hard. It's labored, this. And he so they took him to the back, and they came out and they're like, look, man, they're like, we're going to do x-rays and we're going to do this, but we're like, we think he's having, we think he's just going, his heart's just giving up, you know, his heart, he's having cardiac arrest is what's going on. And I just kind of broke down, and, they came back out and they're like, look, that's what's going on. There's a tumor or a growth that is growing inside of his chest that is pushing on his heart and causing his heart to work harder than it needs to be. And it's inefficient. It's pushing so hard now that, you know, the blood that it's pumping is not pumping enough oxygen, and he's just basically choking to death. And, you know, they asked me, they're like, you know, what do you want to, I'm like, can we fix this? And she's like, you know, I can refer him to a heart specialist, but, you know, it was like, dude, he's 13, you know, like, do you really want to go down that road? And, and it's no guarantee. And let's be honest, he's probably not going to make it. And she told me, she's like, look, he's dying. You know, I told her, I was like, just tell me straight up. And she's like, he's dying. You need to come be with him.
Yeah.
And,
sorry, brother.
It's tough, man.
I know.
Yeah, you know, so they put him down.
Yeah.
And it's tough.
I've involved in a lot of those with the dogs I've owned, and with some clients that we've become good friends with. And it's always brutal to go through that, because these dogs mean so much to us, and they're such an integral part of the family, and in some ways they're better family members than family members can be. You know, they're that thing in your life through the thick and thin, and man, I could see it written all over you what it did. And
well, you know, like I was saying, I've had them for 13 years, and I work from home. You know, I make podcasts and I run a website and I go to school, so I'm here with them all the time. I wake up, we go for a cruise, we go to his park. You know, or a park. He has a favorite, or he had a favorite, and we'd go there, get coffee, and he'd play in the park and stuff. Then I'd come home and then do my work, and you know, he's here with me all day, and so that's, you know, it's tough. And 13 years is a long time, you know, and it's I've never had to put a dog down. I know when I was younger, my mom, we had a Chihuahua that was like 16, and she had to have her put down. But I wasn't there, and it was tough for me because I was the only one there. You know, obviously I'm divorced, so my ex wasn't there, and then my son was with her, so it was just me. And then it was tough because it was like, you know, you get done with everything. They ask if I want a few minutes with them. I'm like, no, man, I can't just sit here and hold my lifeless dog. Like that's horrible. And had me fill out the paperwork, and I was like, okay,
yeah. And
then it's like, the lady came out and had me fill out the paperwork and then started to walk away. And I was just like, well, I guess that's it, huh? You know, because it kind of hits you like he's not coming out. Like it's not like a normal visit where, all right, come back out. I'm holding his leash and his collar. Yeah. And it's like, that's it. And, you know, it's just, and I had to go tell my kid, and that's tough, man. You know, because we got the dog right after my kid was born, not too long. So they've been together their whole lives.
Yeah, that's all.
We have another one as well who's also 13, Lab Beagle mix. So I don't want people to think this is my only dog, but he's with my ex most of the time. Sure. But it's tough, man. It's tough, and I've never had to do that, and it's I can't. It's just a tough situation, you know.
It's always tough at the end because you're conflicted. Like, can I do more? Can I buy a little bit of time? If I take him out, is he going to get better? Is or not? And what I've seen is when it gets to the point of realizing your dog is in pain, fortunately we have that option for our animals of letting them go with dignity while they're loved, because you probably take him home. It's warm right now. He's already in distress. You go out for the afternoon to even grab food real quick. You're like, oh my shit, my dog's like sick, and he dies by himself. You know, like that's not as tough as it is to be there with them when they pass and experience that with them. I couldn't imagine a more fitting and honorable way for something that meaningful for 13 years of your life to be there and comfort him and look in those eyes.
100%.
That he's going with dignity, and that suffering that he's facing of you know, drowning while he's living, it's gone. Or pain when they get cancer and all the stuff that old dogs it just comes on. They're so good at hiding that stuff until it's way too far gone. You know,
he was playing with his rope the day before. You know, like he had coughed and I saw he had a little bit of breathing problems, and I'm like, that's when I was like, I definitely need to get you into the vet like tomorrow. Yeah. And then like later that day, he was completely fine. I'm throwing his rope. He's chasing it. Like we're messing around. Yeah. And then, it is what it is. Yeah, it's tough, man.
The end. And, I'm fortunate. I'm happy for you that you were able to be there for him, even though it's as tough as it was on you.
That was one of my biggest concerns, was because of the whole COVID thing, they keep you separated from everything. Initially, what they would do is they would bring in – so initially when I gave them the dog, they took the dog to the back without me. Yeah. I wasn't even inside. I'm standing outside in the parking lot. And they're like, well, his breathing is kind of bad. We're going to go ahead and take him back. Sure. And I'm like, all right, cool. And then they called me in, and that's when they're like, hey, this is – we think that this is happening. We're going to give him an IV, and then we'll be back to let you know. And then my concern was, because she already said like, hey, I think he's going into cardiac arrest. And my concern was that he was going to die and me not be there. And I would have felt so bad because I know he was probably looking for me, because this dog was all about me, man. Like, and he did he didn't like having me out of his sight. And I think that was because he was older and just, we'd been around each other so much. He just wanted to be around me all the time. Yeah. So I was really concerned that he was going to pass before I could go back there. So I was happy that she came out and she was frank about it. Like, look, he's dying. You need to come back and see him. And I was like, okay. And it was just tough, man. It's just, but you're right. You're right. It's tough for me, and it's something I'll deal with, watching him die. But it was the right thing. It's the right thing to do. And I remember reading something or watching something somewhere about a vet talking about how one of the hardest things they have to do is put a dog down. Yeah. And they asked the owner if they want to be in the room. Yeah. And the owner saying, no, I don't want to be in the room. And then the dog understanding what's happening and then goes to look for the owner. Yeah. And they're not there. And they said that's just super hard. And I just didn't want that kind of situation to occur. And, he deserved me to be there to comfort him and calm him during the whole process. And it was just hard. Yeah.
I was involved in a similar situation where I can see the other side of that. One of my best friend from my department, his police dog is my favorite dog of all time. Like, Ike was like my jam. That dog was the hardest motherfucking dog on the planet, and taught us all so much about what we didn't know about dogs. And when it came time for Ike to go, my buddy had called me a couple different times over the preceding months. Like, he's not looking good, man. I think he's like 10 or 11, and not looking good. I'm thinking about this and thinking about that. And I'm like, okay, just let me know when it's time. And then he'd call me about 2 months before. He's like, he's not looking good here. And then a couple days later, he looks pretty good. So when he finally called me, he's like, Ike's not doing good, man. He won't bring his Kong to his son. And him and the son were like each other's people. He goes, he won't bring the Kong back. I go, Ike won't bring a Kong back? No. I go, and he goes, I can't take him, man. I physically him in there. I won't leave him. Like, I'll think he's got more time. And he described what he was doing. I said, let me come up and look at him, and I'll take him if you need. I already told you I'll take him if I need to. We'll work through it. I get up there, and Ike's sitting in his crate, and he looks over at me, and he doesn't even bark. I'm like, oh, fuck that. Like, that's not Ike, man. You can see he's whining when he sits down. We think he had some cancer in his groin where it was painful to sit. I was like, dude, there's no way. That's not Ike at all. And so we muzzled him up. I could handle him pretty well, but he's feisty. And I drove him down. He lives about 2 hours away because he's up at our remote station. And I drove him down, made the appointment with the vet in kind of the middle of the night, and was like, hey, here's what we're dealing with, and I got to bring him in this fashion. And when I took Ike out of the car, he saw that guy. He's muzzled. I'm holding him on leash. He saw the tech come out to get him. He starts firing off on him. He's like, oh, I'm here to work, man. And totally forgot that he's as sick as he is and stuff, and took him in there. They sedated him. It took him about 20 minutes for the sedation to even kick in, but I could see it in his eyes. And when I called my buddy, I was like, hey, he passed peacefully. This is what happened. He's like, he's just heartbroken. Like, I should have been there for him. I feel like a fucking pussy. Like, dude, you would not have been able to walk him into that vet watching him get out of the car. And we all know he's that sick. He's like, he's a very sick dog. But in that moment, he didn't look like it. And your wife and kids would have been looking at him going, we can take him home. He is better. And you would have let him suffer, and he would have been worse off for a couple days. So I'm glad that it happened the way that it did, because I could be mostly objective, even though it like tore me up too. But
yeah,
could not do that with him. And he's like, that's not the way I can see him. That's not how I can remember him. That's not all the pain and suffering and headbutting we went through. I need it to be this way at the end. But he had me as his stand-in, and I was honored to be able to do that for him. But, I can't, I read that thing you've talked about, and I was like, people that just drop their dog off with the leash and go, I can't watch it because it's and that dog is with strangers and afraid and everything at the end. No, man, those animals deserve much more than that from all of us. And sure. We have to honor what they've brought to our lives. So I'm thankful for you that you were able to usher him off in that fashion, as tough as it's going to be for you for the coming months and years and the rest of your life. That's a huge part of your life, man.
Yeah, no, it's for me. I think the really hard part was that I wasn't expecting that wasn't even the realm of possibility. Like, I thought I was going to go in and they're going to be like, oh, he's got a really bad cough. You need to, give him this medication, and he'll be okay. Like, it wasn't like,
yeah.
So the suddenness of it, I guess it's a good thing because he didn't suffer for a long time, and it wasn't like an idea that I have to wrestle with.
Right.
It was like, hey man,
right,
we're here, and the vet's saying he's dying. Like, there's no arguing with it, and it was just like, so that made the decision easy. As hard as it is, it made it as easy as it could be, I guess. Yeah. But you're right, man. I'll think about him forever. I ordered some picture frames and some stuff, so I'm gonna print out some photos of him, put in my kids' room and stuff. But yeah, it's tough sitting here thinking about his stuff.
Yeah. I can imagine. Yeah. And I appreciate you having me on this close to that. Man. Through that and trying to move forward and that. And thank you for sharing that too. We don't know each other. And
no, it's
vulnerable in that fashion. And
it's fine. I think it's, I put it on Facebook and stuff like that. I put it on Instagram. I put it on my business and I don't think I put it on my last personal Instagram photo was a picture of him laying on the couch like last week, a couple days ago or something. And I didn't put anything about him dying on my personal one, but I did on my business one just because I knew, I don't know, I just wanted to put it out there because he was a good dog. He was an asshole sometimes. He was a wiener dog, so he's got an attitude.
Yeah.
But, I just thought it would be nice for people to see, the dog. I don't know. I was trying to honor him and kind of explain like, hey, I know I make podcasts, but here's a minute. I'm gonna need a minute, because of this whole situation. Literally went down like minutes before we were getting ready to start recording.
Yeah.
And I was like, on my way over there, I was like, I really hope he doesn't think I'm saying that my dog is sick because he's a dog handler, and I'm like, appealing to your emotions, because I'm trying to like delay this or something.
Yeah. No, professional. I also know when it comes to dogs and older dogs and how quickly they decompensate with stuff. I was obviously hopeful for you that you would have better news when you got back to me, like, yeah, hey, he's got this or whatever. But when you said that he passed, I'm also have been involved in that enough to go like, that's old dogs, and it's very fast, and it's very, you just can't even wrap your head around how fast things are moving like that. And as tough a decision you had to make, I think nature was going to make that decision for you even quicker. Like you didn't have hours even at that point. So
it was it all went fast, man. I had him that morning. I got up, we went to the park. I almost didn't, I would take him to the park almost every day, not every day, at least 3 or 4 times a week.
Sure.
And that morning I woke up and I'm like, I don't want to be rushed setting up for the podcast. So I don't know if we're going to go. And then I'm like, you know what? I'll take him to the park. We'll go to the park. And he was just very lethargic at the park. He didn't want to walk around. Like, I got him out of the car and said, normally when I pull up to the park, he's like, fuck yeah. Like, he knows that's where we're at. And he would jump from the passenger seat onto my, like, barely even let me turn the car off and everything. He's trying to get in my lap and get out of the car to go sniff around. And he wasn't like that. And we got out. He got out and used the bathroom and did his thing. But he just didn't want to walk around. He just kind of stood there and was just sniffing. And I'm like, man, he's not feeling good, bud, and I knew he'd had a cough and stuff, and it was just reinforcement, like, okay, you know, I need to get him to the vet, you know, like that's why I was trying to work on that appointment. And then, yeah, I think the way my post I put on Facebook, I think some people thought that I took him to the park and that he got overheated and he died, and that wasn't the case. It was not that I had done anything wrong. No one had said anything like that, but they thought that may have kind of, I didn't put details of what happened. I didn't put like, yeah, there was a growth that stopped his heart kind of thing. Yeah. So I don't know, but it's just, yeah, it's tough, man. And I know he's old, you know, I knew he was old, and I've been telling my kid that, and I, you know, like I told him, I'm like, dude, hey, the dogs are getting old. Like it's, you know, it's going to happen at some point. And I told him, you know, what I tell him is like, the best thing we can do right now while they're still alive and they're doing their thing is when we go for walks, let them sniff stuff, you know, don't drag them. Like, hey, I know I got to go walk around the block. Don't just drag him around the block. Let him stop and sniff things, man. He's old, you know, this is his last moments to check stuff out. We would go for cruises, you know, I'd let him cruise and he'd sit up there with his paws on the window on the passenger side with his head out, just looking at everything. Yeah. And I just tried to, I don't know, I knew he was getting old, and I just tried to do stuff to, you know, make him happy as a dog. Which sounds stupid, I guess. If some people are, I'm not like your dog owner where I'm very strict and the dog lays in the corner, and then when I allow him, he comes over and I pet him and he goes back and lays. I'm not like that. He's on the furniture, you know, he'll jump on the bed with me and stuff. Like, that's the kind of dog owner I was, a very like loving, you know, all over him kind of stuff. So I would do stuff like that. I would take him and go get a puppuccino from Starbucks. You know, I would pick him up and let him look at the countertops just because he never got to see the countertops. So I'd let him look and see like, hey, look at all this stuff. Yeah. You know, and like, yeah, that's what's going on up here. And I would literally hold him and walk him around the kitchen and like, yeah, look at that. Nice. And I don't know. I just tried to, because I knew he was getting older, I just tried to do as much as I could to make him happy, you know, the last couple of years of his life.
Good.
And, you know,
you guys had a good life together. That's I think in the end all you can ask for a dog is that it all worked out and he was a good dog and you loved him. Yeah,
and I'll get another one. You know, after at some point we'll pick up another dog. You know, I don't know what I'm going to get yet. I think my son wants to get another wiener dog, which is understandable. Sure. Which I love too. He was my second one. Yeah, great dog. I as a dog trainer, is that a harder breed to train? I can imagine it is. They seem like they're a little bit hard-headed compared to other dogs, a little bit more feisty.
A little bit. I really, honestly, the difficulty with training those guys is just how low they are to the ground. You know, like trying to teach them to do stuff using any leash pressure or even food motivated stuff. Like, Jesus, they're all the way slammed to the ground. They're lowriders, you know.
Yeah,
they can be a little feisty. I think we've trained one here. We actually have one that came through. She's about 10 years old. They live down in San Francisco. Could not take her out in public. The dog was so aggressive to everybody and everything. And
really,
and they can enjoy her even that late in life. And that's my only dealings with them. You know, I think a lot of people write small dogs off as just they're small dogs. They pick them up and carry them when they're assholes or whatever. And, but they tend to have a little worse behavior than the bigger dogs. And we actually have a 7-pound Chihuahua, so I know what that's like. He gets to do things that my 90-pound Dutch Shepherd doesn't do.
Exactly, yeah.
You have to be really careful about those things, about proximity to you and how much affection you're showering on them if they're having behavioral problems. Mm-hmm. But, man, I'm here to tell you, like, good dogs are good dogs. I don't care what breed it is. I think different breeds bring different things to the table. Like, if you want a chill dog, probably don't go look for a German Shorthair Pointer. Like, you might find one, but that is not what they're supposed to be. And German Shepherd, probably if you just want the dog to sleep and hang out with the family all day, German Shepherds aren't the best fit for you. But you might find an amazing one in that. But we just trained a lab puppy the other day. She's super young. She's like 14, 16 weeks old. Just bomb-proof. Just a bomb-proof dog. Like, you couldn't ask for more. And it's like, good dogs are good dogs. That's what I think it's more important to look at is like, what's more trainable, what's not more trainable. And I always think like, well, what are you training it for? In my world, training for law enforcement stuff, the most trainable dogs are Malinois and Dutch Shepherds because of how smart they are, how fast they learn, how fast they want to do everything. But they're also incredibly hard to deal with and live with on the other end. So do you want to train it to be a good dog, good pet? Well, there's a lot of breeds out there that are more suitable for those lifestyles. So I think all dogs are trainable. We do know that some dogs actually have cognitive learning disabilities. They don't learn like other dogs do. It takes them a long time, if ever, to pattern stuff. We have seen that in our work. But
Are there breed specific, or are you talking about just in general? There's some dogs occasionally.
specific, like an individual. I've seen it in almost any breed I can think of, and mixes. There's no pattern to it. It's just a genetic thing. It's a result of extremely poor breeding, coupled with also just genetics. Sometimes genetics don't work out the way they're supposed to, and you could have a really good breeding, and the dogs don't turn out like you think they're going to. But yeah, individually, we've seen dogs that have learning disabilities. They just can't pattern. You could do something times in a row, and it won't stick. It's just
Yeah, man. Well, anything else? I know I asked you about your canine training, and then we went on a tangent of me, venting about my dog. But is there anything else you want to cover with your business, or maybe you want to throw your social media and contact information, and like what kind of services you can be reached out for, or in general?
So we're Gold Hill Canine. We're on Instagram and Facebook. Pretty heavy on Instagram. Heavy, I should say. We selectively use Instagram to our advantage now. I've pulled away from social media a lot over the last year or two and use it selectively now for specific things. But we're there. We still have a presence. Website's always the best thing, goldhillcanine.com. You can do either canine or canine spelled out the word. So yeah, man, we specialize in behavior rehabilitation. So the more challenging dogs, up to and including human aggression. It's not the dogs I want all the time. I got bit not too long ago by a client dog pretty severely. And it sucked, but it's a mistake on my part. And the dog taught me, don't make that mistake, dummy. And so it took me about 3 weeks to heal because it was right at the beginning of the lockdown. I'm like, I'm not going to those ERs. It's full of COVID, man.
Oh, so, yeah, for sure.
Blew this thing that's to the bone down between my fingers. And so we deal with that stuff. But I think really what we enjoy the most, Liz and I, my partner in this, my fiance, she's the other half of our business. We love people so much, and we like seeing them have better lives with their dogs. We just did a walk this morning before the podcast with one of our client dogs, but also met up with some clients whose dog went home last week. They're still struggling to find that right space. It's going to take them a moment to rewire some stuff in their relationship, but they're willing to do the work in it. So they met us down at the farmer's market where we go train dogs and walked around and seeing the smile on their face. She's posting stuff on Instagram and sending stuff to her friends because the dog could not be in public before. He's an Australian, so highly reactive. Like another local trainer had come over and worked with them, told them to put the dog down because it happens regularly. We get a lot of clients that that trainer is out of options and past their skill set, and instead of just referring them to somebody that is an expert in that area, the ego takes over and they're like, well, just put it down. And we're like, there are
That's
dogs
so horrible.
That might be the final option, but not until we've exhausted a lot. And they're so genetically compromised. This guy's just spun up and just out of control, and then it unhinged their relationship. And we love seeing those people have this life back with their dog, to be able to walk and look forward to a future of enjoying him he's a fairly younger dog. They got a good 5-10 years more out of him. And that's what keeps us going. The dog training part, it's fun, but I've been involved in dogs the better part of my adult life. So there's not a lot of deep challenges within that anymore. Individual dogs will throw some stuff out. You're like, well, that's a new one. We haven't seen that fella. But for the most part, it's not the dog training so much that gets me super excited. But Liz and I truly love working with our clients. And we've created a program in our behaviors thing that revolves around the owners. It's not obedience training. It's lifestyle training for them and teaching the dog how to do some certain things and how to live a certain way. But more importantly, how the owners, how to have the relationship that they truly want. Like you talked about, having your dog on the couch, on the bed. I don't give a shit about all that if your dog's not an asshole in public. If he's not having these behavioral issues over here, you can have all that. And if he is having all those behavioral issues over here, here's what you can do to then someday achieve what you actually want. But the two have to balance out. So we love being able to impact people's lives in that fashion. And that's why we keep doing what we do. It's a lot of fun in that world. So yeah, that's how you can reach out and touch us. That's the things that we do on that channel. If you want to follow that, I also have a page called Advantage E-Bikes. That's kind of, I guess, morphed into my personal page, but it's where I do my mountain biking stuff, which is all part of the mental health aspect of my life. And one of the things we just started doing on Gold Hill's page, Mondays, we do a live broadcast on Instagram on Gold Hill Canine. It's called Mental Health Mondays. Me talking about my experiences in dealing with mental health and PTSD issues, and things I've learned, things I still struggle with. And I'm just trying to share information that has helped me and get it off my chest more. I keep saying it's actually therapy for me to do it, but people can get something out of it. It's pretty cool. I'm working on YouTube videos. I was kind of like, I'm going to do one a week. And then about 3 into that, I was like, fuck, that's a lot.
It's a process, man. People don't realize speaking of that, so what I've been trying to do for my YouTube videos and the podcast in general is my goal is to release one on Monday mornings and on Thursday mornings. That's like been what I'm trying to do. However, and I try to release them at the same time because I don't want you to listen to the audio and it says, yeah, I should check out my YouTube video. Then you go to YouTube and it's not even there. However, like you have learned probably, is that to upload a video to YouTube takes time. And then, so I'm uploading 2 to 3 hour high def videos to YouTube, which takes 3 hours to 5 hours to upload. And then YouTube takes another 5, hours to even process the video.
Oh, shit.
And then if there's an issue anywhere in there, you have to start the upload process all over again. It's just it's a super pain in the ass. So I think I'm going to try to keep doing on Mondays and Thursdays, but I'm not going to hold myself to it as much because I get super stressed out. I'll be up at 2 a.m. trying to fix something that's an issue with the video to upload to try to get it out in time for everyone to hear it on Monday and Thursday. But I feel like I'm putting too much pressure on myself because this is all me. I set up all the lights, I set up the camera, I do all this myself. I produce it all myself. And like you said, it just takes time, and it's taking away time from other stuff, and it's putting more stress on me to try to meet that schedule than I wanted to. And I just want to be able to release videos as I can. So I'm gonna try to maintain Mondays and Thursdays, but I'm not going to let it bother me. And if it doesn't come out on Mondays and Thursdays, for those that are listening, I'm sorry, but that is what it is. I'm just not going to get super stressed out about something because it's a pain in the ass.
I kind of had to embrace that failure pretty quickly. I set a goal. I had the intentions behind it was to hold myself more accountable, to push myself. We're in the process of starting a media company as well. And I have all this crap that I've bought. And I was like, let me push myself to do this. And kind of me being a perfectionist, I was like, look, I know I can film a quick video. I'm like, holy crap, dude, 2 hours. I'm keeping my videos to 20 minutes and under if I can. And I know what you're talking about, the upload times and everything. But I was like, let me see if I can do better than just filming it on my phone. I've shot dozens and dozens of videos over my time on social media just via my phone. I think it's a great use social media, but I'm like, I need to do something more than that. That doesn't light my fire at all. So I had the bold fucking idea. Like, I got 3 camera angles, I think, on my third one. I'm like, I got 3 camera angles here. Well, now I need to figure out how to edit multiple.
The editing.
Final Cut and shit. And so you realize the things you're trying to tackle that you feel like you're going to do, it's going to be a lot to figure out. So very quickly, I was in the same boat. I'm so stressed at trying to do this thing that is actually supposed to be a little bit cathartic for me to do. Now I'm fucked. I said I'm going to do it, so I'm a failure if I don't. But I'm actually failing to do it. I started missing getting them out. So I just I did my last live. I was like, I'm going to just embrace that and say, I'm going to pivot. I'm doing a video about every 2 weeks. I'm still doing the live every Monday because I enjoy that platform. I can jump on here, ramble for an hour, we're done. But the videos, I'm going to produce things that I believe in and that I'm happy with, as much as you can ever be happy with your product, your art. But at a quality that keeps pushing the envelope for me, but I'm not going to then say I have to do this every week because I'm going to start sacrificing the quality strictly to get it out. I'm just going to film this one on the iPhone so I can get it out this week. And I'm like, no, let me just do kind of what you just said. Every 2 weeks is my goal, but the quality matters more to me than just the quantity at this point. And that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're throwing out there. If anybody wants to check it out, it is on YouTube, our Gold Hill Canine YouTube channel. You'll see the playlist for that. And we have some dog training stuff on there too we've just done recently. That's a new thing we're moving into is YouTube. We kind of didn't put any effort into it over the past years because everything else was taking our focus and was showing results. So we're kind of moving in that fashion. And yeah,
that's kind of how I was. 30.
Yeah.
I did like 35 or so episodes. I think you were in the first like 5 or 10 people that had a video. Because I looked at YouTube. I'm like, you know what? Like, one, I like watching podcasts. I like the videos because not only can you hear the voice, but you can see how the people's reactions and stuff. So that way it's more context in a conversation, especially when we're talking about subjects like we've been talking about. I've been pretty heavy on this podcast. I want to see how the person's saying it, and like, are they being facetious when they're saying it? You can tell by seeing that. So that was one reason I was like, I need to get it on video because I know there's people that appreciate the video. And then two, why am I not on one of the top 3, I think it's top 3 social media websites in the world? Like, there's no reason. I'm already doing everything minus the recording of the actual video, which, like you found out, it's not just recording it and uploading it. There's a lot more that goes to it. There's many hours of other things that go to it. But it's worth it in the end, and there's no reason for me not to grow that page as well. So that's the same kind of deal. I just pulled the trigger on it. I'm like, you know what? I've figured out Instagram. I figured out Facebook. I kind of got this stuff. I figured out the podcast websites. Now I need to focus on this one, YouTube, because that one on its own can generate income. For people, as long as you meet the requirements, the 1,000 subscribers and the 4,000 hours of video watched in that year, then you can monetize. That's the requirements to monetize your page. You have to have 1,000 subscribers and you have to have 4,000 hours of content viewed in the last year.
Wow.
So up until that point, until you've met that, you can't monetize your page, and you're not making any money from YouTube on it. So for the people listening or watching on YouTube, I'm not getting paid for that.
Yeah.
Most people get paid for outside advertisers, which I don't do either. I just promote my own page, jkramergraphics.com. Check that out. But yeah, it's like if you're going to get serious about it and you want it to become another source of income, then there's no reason not to jump on that other platform. Just like I saved my page name on TikTok, but I'm not using TikTok. I don't have TikTok on my phone. I downloaded it. I made a profile name just so I had the name saved, and then I deleted it. And then in the future, if I feel, because the account's still there, in the future, if I feel like that's a viable, platform to get into, and it's not as shady as it is now with China and stuff like that, I'll open it back up and use it. But But yeah.
I appreciate it, bud. I really, really appreciate your time. Thanks for having me on.
For sure, man. It was good. I'll have you on again. I think, like I said before, having these difficult conversations about some of these situations, I like having a different perspective, having a law enforcement officer come on and kind of explain how you look at a situation, and I can explain how I looked at it. And I think we covered, quite a few different things that hopefully the listeners and the watchers will give them something to think about. And, like you mentioning how earlier you were saying, I don't know, it was something you brought up, and it was like, oh, and I hadn't thought about it like that way, letting the dude move his car, park it back into the parking spot, where I was like, how would you let a drunk driver do that? I can't believe they would have even done that. And then you were like, well, they're just letting him prove that he's drunk, that he's innocent until proven guilty. And I'm like, okay, I didn't think of it like that. Like, that's a different perspective that I hadn't thought about. So I appreciate you coming on and bringing that kind of insight to it and stuff like that. And I'd love to have you back on in a couple months, and we'll, whatever shenanigans are go on between now and then, we'll get into them and maybe break them down a little bit.
Yeah, I really hope like in the next couple months we get back together. It's like, yeah, man, it's been super chill.
Hopefully.
Sanity prevailed, and everybody's just chill, man. That's like really all, because I can't take more murder hornets and all that shit too. Like, it's just
all the shenanigans.
Like, there's a comet nearby that you can see, so we'll probably have to worry about that next.
We'll see. We'll see what the media tells us to be scared about next. It'll be great.
Yeah. Everybody's like, hey, this other shit's dying out. Oh, there's a fucking comet coming. Like,
yeah.
Everybody watching the comment knew that, but we didn't. So, like, okay. But that's going to pass, and nobody's going to care. And, we'll all go on.
In a couple of weeks, there'll be something else that we're all freaked out about or whatever. But, man. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday, dude.
Appreciate it. Yeah, you too.
Have a good one. Bye.